Some of the angling practices discussed within this podcast are not in any way condoned by Korda. Now, Darrell can't change the narrative of his story, but we respect him for telling it truthfully. Welcome to the Thinking Tackle Podcast. Now, if you haven't already, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Today, we are joined in the studio by UK big carp legend Darrell Peck, and we're going to be talking about his pursuit of some of the biggest wild carp in the world. Now, mate, I remember being at Korda around the time that this all sort of started to germinate in your mind, if you like, this idea that I think anyway, that you couldn't find the challenges you were looking for on these shores. Is that right?
Not just the challenges. Obviously, that is an element of it, but the space, that was one of the things. I wanted like more room and to be competing more against the lake than the anglers. So more, what's the word you would use? Not like authentic, but like
pure, like a more pure sort of pursuit.
A pure pursuit of big carp that other people hadn't had in their hands as such, that I hadn't seen, rather than trying to recreate someone else's story, which is the UK dream of like you go and pick a fish, you try and catch it. Having done that for a few years, I wanted something bigger, like bigger fish, bigger lake, and less people.
And actually, the context to that is that you had been doing all that. You had been the ultimate competitor. You know, you'd been someone who was going toe to toe with really, really top anglers week in, week out on a lot of the venues you fished. Yeah. Was there a particular moment when it was like, nah, not anymore?
Well, in 2012, I fished Fen Drayton, and then I fished in the winter of that year, I fished Rockford, caught some really nice fish, big buzz on good lakes, and then I didn't have tickets that really motivated me, like nothing that like I was driven for. 2014, I had a little go on Burfield, very, very difficult lake, loads of high grade competition. Dave Lane caught it, really took the wind out of my sails a little bit. Then went to Belgium with Dan on that masterclass shoot. Had my eyes open to what was on the other side of the channel that wasn't club lake or wasn't commercial carp fishing. So like, I wouldn't say Hombeek was public, but a big, more sort of UK syndicate style lake, less pressure. What was the question?
But you know, that lake was kind of similar though, wasn't it? You had a lot of pretty dedicated blokes who were there as much as you were.
Yeah. It was fishing for bigger carp, but under similar circumstances to the UK. And then I remember in 2015, I got permission to fish at Baston on the ocean. So I had pretty exclusive access to a pretty cool lake with some pretty cool carp in it that people would absolutely probably pull your arm off for that opportunity. And I've got to be honest, when I was fishing there, it didn't do it for me, in the fact that the best that I could hope for was a potential upper 40. And when you've fished lots of venues and caught a number of carp that size, it's just not that exciting. And for me, in my younger years, you're always progressing from your club lakes to the North Mets to Yateley's. It's the adventure of taking on a challenge that you're not sure if you're ready for. And the Orient had always been there. You know, I went there in 2006 with Korda on a carp match. Saw it, fished it for a week with Joe Morgan. Didn't catch anything, obviously, but it was always there. And then there was the Andy Chambers sort of stuff that was in carp world. And the stuff that I'd read in the Hutchinson books from being a kid, and it was always there. But to be really, really, really honest, with a wheelbarrow and fishing smaller lakes like Hombeek and in the UK, I feel confident, because when you've done something so many times, you know you can do it again. You know, whereas Orient, boat fishing, Echo Sounders, big lake like that, I always hoped that somebody was going to take me, and that. Even when I started going to Swallow with Korda at the carp shows, I hoped to infiltrate some of these European terminators, and that I would go with someone, they would show me. But when I mentioned long sessions to Orient to people like that, they laughed at me because they think you're the English goolobber. You know, you got a wheelbarrow, you fish for a small carp in the UK, and much of the UK, sort of the upper echelons of it would don't respect European carp fishing. They have it the same way, vice versa. You have never caught any big carp. What the fuck do you know? You know. So I ended up having to go on my own.
I want to just come back to the point you made there, which I think it was going to be my opening question. I think I skirted around it a bit, but the point is that you were self-aware enough that you realised that being out of your comfort zone was something that was going to be really important to you.
Yeah.
That I don't suppose most of us get to that position, because we're never going to become accomplished enough or have done it enough that becomes important. How did you decide what was going to be out of your comfort zone?
Well, I think it always had to be one of those big Champagne region lakes. It was going to either be Darrell or it was going to be Orient. I think, obviously, Darrell is, you have to book your swim in advance, and that sort of takes away the essence of what it's about. Looking for them and finding them is almost as much of it as catching them. You know, having that contact when you're on fish, and not being able to move on somewhere like Darrell. I know it's obviously got the bigger fish, but it was not about catching a 100-pounder at all. It was more about going somewhere, finding your feet, learning on the job.
So that first trip, Orient obviously has a lot of history. And I think you'd spoken to lads before you went as well, hadn't you? But Orient has that history. But I want to explore how you were feeling around this. Was it actually meeting that kind of adrenaline buzz that you were hoping for as you set out for that first trip?
I'll ask that again.
So I think what I'm trying to get to is, obviously you're searching for something different.
Yeah.
In the sense that you want to feel out of your depth.
Yeah.
When you set off and you're on your own.
Yeah.
And you're probably underprepared. We're going to talk about how underprepared you were, I suppose. But when you set off and you got that long road ahead of you, did you genuinely feel a different kind of buzz than you were getting from your fishing week in, week out?
Yeah. Because I knew it was going to be me against the lake as opposed to me against the anglers. And I knew that I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I really did.
That's the important bit, right?
Yeah. You know, there's the difference from going to fishing for another big one in the UK on another lake of a similar size to what you fished, of a similar type gravel pit. You know, when you've done it thousands of nights, a couple of thousands of nights, say, fishing on the same, you're going to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, whereas Orient is like a bulldoze valley. You know, I don't know what a spot is. I don't know what a feature is in that lake. I don't know how many fish are in the lake. I don't know. I know there's big uns. I don't know usually you know how many fish per acre, where they like to. I didn't know any of that. So that was. I did expect to suffer.
I'm just throwing that up to give.
I did expect to suffer, but I don't. I think I was. Even though I wasn't say I was overly confident, I still believed when I set off that I would catch, because I thought that ultimately there's not 10 carp in there. You're talking hundreds of carp.
Okay.
At some point I was going to find them. You know, that's what I sort of, I'll see if I can jump out, you know. But yeah, possibly, you can't imagine how big something is until, and unless you've got any context or you've done it before. And it is, you aren't looking for jumping carp on somewhere like that. You're not. Okay,
we'll come back to that point. Toby's just throwing a picture up here. I want you to describe to us, for those people who don't know Orient at all, A, where it sits in the history of carp fishing, and B, let's actually turn that around. A, what is it? How big is it? What are we looking at? And B, why is it important to European carp fishing?
So it's in the Champagne region of France. It's half an hour from Gigantica. I think the nearest town is Troyes.
Right.
It was created as flood relief for the river. I'm going to say Seine, but I could be wrong there. As in, like, they lower the level routinely each year through the warmer months, so that when the rains come in the winter and the spring, there's no chance of the river flooding the big
Paris
cities. So they can turn that water, divert that into the lake. So that's what it was created for. I would say it's important in the history of carp fishing because before the rise of commercial carp fishing, so where lakes were stocked with carp for commercial gain and not force-fed bait, but artificially fed 200-pounders that we have today. The biggest carp in the world used to reside in the biggest, wildest, most natural environments in carp fishing. And the big carp anglers of that generation would go to lakes like that to catch the biggest carp. Now, these lakes have fallen by the wayside because they don't hold the biggest carp, and you can catch 70-pounders much more readily in much more comfortable conditions. But I think in terms of a challenge, it's a big challenge. But yeah, it wasn't actually about trying to catch a monster necessarily, but to go, initially it was about going, sampling it, learning that style of fishing, and perhaps holding your own monster, maybe, you know.
We've already established that a lot of the challenge for you comes from within. Like, the size of fish doesn't matter because actually it's you against you anyway. Yeah,
it's a 50-pounder is a very big carp to me. It depends. Like, obviously, everything's relative to people, and if you like, I remember years ago listening to reading the Kevin Nash article, and I'm not putting him down in this, but he said that a big carp start at 35 pounds to him, and at the time I remember reading that thinking, big carp's a 20-pounder because it's relative to me, young, naive, didn't know. But I've caught quite a few 40-pounders, 50-pounders, but still they are, to me, a 50-pounder is a very big carp, whichever way you frame it, and especially a wild 50-pounder. You know, like for me, a 50-pounder from there is of value of a UK 50 to me. I'm not saying that it should be anyone else's opinion, but that is my opinion. And if I never caught a carp bigger than 50-pound ever again, that would be enough for me. You know, it's like, yeah.
Let's have a look at this. So this is Tobes has just thrown up a picture. Now, it's incredibly broken up, mate. I probably didn't know that. To be honest. I'm not sure I've spent much time dwelling on this. You must have, looking at maps before you went out.
Like, in my head, you know, when you're thinking an autumn session, you're thinking open water, commanding on a normal size UK lake. You're thinking of commanding a central area of deep water, possibly off the back of the westerly winds, that sort of thing. And I probably thought the same before I went there, but that's not the case. Well, you know, you want to break it down into smaller segments, because when you're towing out off the end of a point, you're just towing out. You might as well be towing out off Southend Pier. You know, it's the chances of a carp encountering your rig when you're way out in open water in the desert. If you're on a feature, maybe different. But if you're way out in the middle in the mud, and it's impossible to say how many carp are in there. You know, I would, if pushed, I would say between 500 and 1,500.
Now, are these carp fish that have been stopped by the authorities? Are they naturally, do they breed in there? Like,
I don't know. Years ago, they used to do what they call a vindage every 10 years or so, and the vindage is to lower the level, to make repairs to the barrage, to make sure that it's completely safe. And I do think fish over the years would go missing around those times, whether legitimately or whatnot. That doesn't happen anymore. What I do know is in this bottom corner of the picture here, you've got a set of lock gates and a canal where
I see it there coming in at the bottom.
Yeah, that's where the water comes in there.
Right.
And when the water is at its highest in the spring, say June time, like at its highest, the water actually goes over the top of those gates, and the fish can swim over the top of the gates into that canal. Now, one year they had to empty that canal to do some repairs on it, and there was hundreds of carp.
Big uns and all.
Big uns. Like, actually, the one that's on the cover of my book was the biggest one that they pulled out of that canal when they'd done the repairs on it.
So it might be the best bit of canal in the world.
Yeah, but you can't even get to it. It's all fenced off. It's like, it's all not armed guard, but if you were seen,
it's an important bit of infrastructure.
Yeah, if you were seen walking there, I would say within 15 minutes, the police will be there. You know, it's open, nowhere to hide. You'd be caught.
So when you were looking at these, presumably you popped up Google Earth ahead of your trip. You decided you were headed for. I mean, what is open water on that lake? Because you're talking about distances that defy our kind of logic, if you like, aren't they?
So I started in Bivy City, which is by Menzel St. Pair there,
Oh, down this end, yeah.
Down the bottom, which is
the famous Bivvy City.
The famous Bivvy City. That's where I fished in 2000.
So you went to sort of like a familiar area to start with, if you like.
Yeah. Basically, I arrived for my first session. I think it was the last day of August. Had all of my gear in the van. Walked up to the barrage,
which is down the bottom here.
This end, yeah. Thought I saw some fish jumping. To this day, I couldn't tell if it was definitely fish or it was tench or it was fish, but I'm not saying it was carp necessarily. And ended up going in Bivvy City. It took me 2 days to put my rods out. But,
talk to me about that struggle then.
Right, so yeah, I get all my gear down onto the mud into Bivvy City. Was amazed at how many pike anglers were like directly out in front of the swim where I anticipated I was going to go looking for spots. In the rules, you're not technically allowed to fish more than 150 metres out. But when I'd been out in little recce's in the boat with the echo sounder, it was solid weed, like solid, not surface weed, but mid-water weed coming from the bottom for hundreds of metres. So I knew pretty quickly that I was going to have to go out further, but I couldn't be seen by the pike anglers. I couldn't be out there in the daytime. So I think it was the second or third night that I went out far enough to find clear ground. So just driving out with the boat and the echo sounder, the weed would stop, dropped over markers, and I ended up positioning 4 markers in a row at, I think they're between 450 and 350, depending on, like the left one was further than the right one, but they were sort of on the edge of the weed. And I put 20 kilos of 25 millers out. So what I considered big baits at that time. The floats were roughly 30 metres apart, something like that. And I've just filled it in. 20 kilos feels like loads of boilies, 25 millers. Put the rods out, took the best part of all night. Woke up in the morning, pike anglers all over the top of the area. My H blocks are out there. I'm thinking, am I going to get reported? Is this how it's done? Fishing with nylon. So this is like the first thing. I was like, because I've never really fished with braid that much. One of the bobbins was slack. I remember when we went out to collect it, lead was off the clip. An occurrence. That's all I was thinking, an occurrence. And it quite quickly basically happened. I caught tench, had other occurrences. Basically, all 4 rods were out of the water by the day's out. Not pike anglers. Like
these were. I mean, I remember at the time, these were big tench as well, weren't they? Like whopper, like and big roach as well, from memory.
Yeah, big roach as well. But that was when I'd read Andy Chambers' articles. It was you put a big bear bait out and you're waiting for the fish to swim past it and find it. Now, having put 20 kilos of boilies out and had all 4 traps sprung within the first 24 hours, you're like, that? How much? But you can't put more bait out than that because you wouldn't be able to last. You can't. Obviously, you get free bait, but you can't be putting more than 20 kilo a day out. You're going to be going home very quickly. I think I had 280 kilos with me. But I'd done 2 or 3 days doing that and then realised that I couldn't continue to do that. So, yeah, just had to go back to Gigantica, tail between my legs, because I took 3 leisure batches for me. I'd done all of them in 3 days. I had to go back to Gigantica and like it all starts to, the reality of the situation in your mind, you think you're going to catch. You don't realise the problems that you're going to encounter, and suddenly I'm out of power, going through 20 kilos boilies a night. I'm not even getting bites. I'm just reeling in with no leads on my leg clips. So back to Gigantica, charge everything up, try a different swim, same techniques, same problem. So that was, I had about a week's worth of nights with rods in the water, fishing with nylon, fishing 300-400 yards out, catching tench, losing tench, that sort of thing before I change something.
And actually, it doesn't matter who you are. A week is a long time to, in inverted commas, waste, isn't it? In anyone's life.
Yeah.
You've got a job to do. You've got a family, etc.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't time that you can piss up the wall, is it?
No.
But you're learning.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's when you don't go under someone else's wing. You have to make the mistakes to make the adjustments. And so from there, doing a week of blanking, I remember I was drinking a few beers one day just to numb out that I didn't know what to do, thinking that sooner or later something will happen or I'll realise something, but you're waiting for that moment to make an adjustment. Had a few beers, had an afternoon nap, and was woken up by a young French lad. And it was a Sunday morning it was, and on the Friday I'd seen him come across the front of the swim in a boat and go somewhere, and then he'd come into my swim, woke me up, and he'd caught 3, maybe 4. He'd caught a 60, a 40 and a 20. And I reckon this kid was 19, 20. And my eyes, like when he showed me on the back, my eyes were like popping out my head. And it obviously at that very moment, you realise it's possible. You realise there are definitely carp in the lake. And you want to get as close to that area as possible. That was the next thing.
And is this the lad that you've become friendly with since?
Yes.
Yeah.
Constant LaBelle, yeah.
Yeah. So your first encounter with locals, if you like, has not been unfriendly in a way. Like you haven't been rejected, at least.
No. He was real friendly. You know, he'd come to me because I put a post up of my swim. I put a picture up, so he knew that I was there, and he dropped in just to say hi. He was a local lad that worked in a tackle shop, so he was like properly integrated into the scene, as in like he knew all the history of the lake, all the local anglers that fished there, not just the carp anglers, the pike anglers. Like he knew that lake at that age. He knew it very, very well. And although you're not just turning up at Orient with some hinge stiff rigs, seeing a few carp jump, look and casting out. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying it's very, very, very unlikely. You do have to know a little bit.
Can I contrast that with what I'd heard about Shanty? Certainly the first anglers who went to Shanty did that. It's day fishing. They ended flopping out and catching a few, weren't they?
Different levels of stock.
Right.
You know, like...
Shanty's full of fish, is it?
You're talking probably hundreds of thousands versus a few hundred.
Yeah.
You know, in my mind.
Yeah.
I've never been to Shanty, but when they have the carp matches on Shanty, they're routinely putting in thousands of carp. Whereas I don't know of Orient having a stocking of more than 100 carp in.
So in terms of what you got right and what you got wrong, what were the things you took away from the first trip?
Well, to start with, obviously, I was basically driving with the boat, waiting for the weed to stop, and thinking the weed line was my feature. That was my just fishing clear, mate.
Yeah, of course.
Just fishing
good
clear.
Start, right?
Good start. Fishing clear. But in hindsight, the tench kept close to the weed because of the catfish, so they felt comfortable around the weed. So I was literally, in the years since, I've never really caught tench and carp together. That's something I've learned since.
Yeah, that was the one thing that kind of stood out to me as a standing back and observing. You put out 20 key, you're hoping the carp are going to come in. Actually, you just needed to be on them, didn't you? Like, to make sure that could happen. At least.
So everything I'd read from Andy Chambers, for me, was irrelevant and possibly dated info. Like, I don't know this without talking to Andy personally, but I think it's become weedier over the years. I think in the original early years of his fishing, there was no weed in there. I think the tench population has exploded with the weed. So baiting and waiting was a possibility before, whereas now the tench will find it, and if not the tench, the catfish will find it. You cannot bait will not wait in the water more than 24 hours, in my opinion. In most, especially in open water, will not wait. So the next realisation from there was how important a feature can be when the water level's down in the autumn, which is historically when UK anglers travel to Orient. Clear ground means nothing. You know, you either have to be on fish or around a feature that will pull fish. And there's very few features. You know, it's not like a gravel bar here, and you know the distances between a feature and the night zones can be absolutely enormous. So when I bumped into Constant, I was fishing on a swim called Three Tree Island, which is quite a famous night zone on the lake. He was fishing closer to a corner called Lucini Corner, which backs on to what is the Barrage Reserve. Didn't know it. In my head, before I went to Orient, I believed that a lake that's under as little angling pressure as that, the fish would have no need to be avoiding anglers. They could literally swim around the entire lake as if they owned it without any fear, because the chance of bumping into a rig was so slim to none. In hindsight, that's the most stupid thing that I've ever thought in my entire life. And that carp do not want to interact with people regardless of being caught. If they can get away, they want to be in tranquility. And Constantly caught his fish close to the barrage, where you've got more chance of fish coming close to him. And my first carp that I caught from Orient, I caught fishing from a little, like a bass spinning boat. Me and Paul Ford went to the boat shop, hired this little boat, anchored up as close to where Constant had been fishing as possible, which we were in the nearest night zone originally, which is probably 1,500 metres away, so too far to fish. We took this little boat out, didn't see any fish, anchored up out there, found some clear spots, threw some bait out, cast the float rather than go out in the dinghy, and caught one that night. And that the penny started to drop around then, that, you know, the stock was low, and baiting and weighting was irrelevant, and you had to be close to carp.
Is that trip 2, the Paul one?
No, this is the first trip. This same trip. He's still on the
Paul
first
came
trip.
out on the first trip.
Yeah.
Right.
So I had that conversation with Constant LaBelle on the Free Tree Island. He's gone away. I phoned Paul and said, "You won't believe it. This little 19-year-old lad that butter wouldn't melt has caught 3 or 4 fish in 2 nights." And he's like, "Where'd he catch them?" And he says, "Well, you need to go and take the nearest night zone to that." And that's what I did. I went and bivvied up on the nearest night zone to that area. He came out. We went to the boat shop, hired this tiny little green boat, Capvert location it was called.
I've got a picture of that.
Yeah, it's yeah. So,
but this sounds like you're sort of maybe bending what's allowed, or to do that. Is that
so
the sort of vibe?
You can fish from a boat anywhere on the lake apart from in the reserves.
Yeah.
But you cannot night fish from a boat.
Okay.
On the water. You can night fish from the boat in a night zone, but you can only night fish in the night fishing sectors. So we went out in the day, found the spots, marked the spots up, put we had little water bottles with nylon tied to them and big gripper leads, baited them up a little bit, come back to the shore so no one could see us out there. And in France, everyone goes, literally the lake comes deserted around 7 p.m. Like dinner time is like sacred time. And when everyone disappeared, we just shot out there, anchored up, and we didn't do the whole night. We stayed to about 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that. Obviously Paul sitting upright in the chair, snoring like a good one, and I curled up in a ball underneath my reels, and I just woke up to one of my reels. We'd had a couple of tench before it got like really late, and then at some point, I'm gonna say it was like 1, 2, 3 in the morning, you know, something like that. Had an absolute shredder. We recast for a short hour, but we'd had torches on out there and stuff, and technically probably shouldn't have been night fishing there. So yeah, come back to the bank and
yeah, you fell asleep, mate. No one, you know, didn't lost track of time.
Look, we haven't got bed chairs. I didn't mean to be out here, you know, that sort of thing. But when
what was you know, obviously we lost Paul this year. What was you know, some character, right? And was he did he bring a dynamic that helped you, would you say, or in those early trips?
Yeah, but Paul is the complete opposite of me, as in like I possibly lack confidence at times, and Paul's like was always of like, yeah, we're having them, end of having them, like you know, just having them, like, which is good if you're a bit of a, like people say you need to be positive all the time. I don't think that's necessarily true, but if you're a negative person, it helps to have someone positive, you know, to keep the beat up as such. I've sort of told the story of his capture before, but it is worth telling.
This wasn't the first trip, was it?
This is the first trip. This is the first trip. So we've done the session in the boat.
Yeah.
We had it for 3 days, the boat. Then big winds were forecast. The boat was already pre-booked for someone else. We couldn't have it, so we had to go back to bank fishing. I'd already been fishing on the bank for 10 days at this point, something like that, without a take. Paul's super confident because it's his first night putting his rods out from the bank, and we put them out there 450 metres out. The wind came in the night, blowing. It wasn't like foot-high waves or anything, but a good breeze blowing in. By 10 o'clock at night, we had 1 rod left each. We had a tench on the outside one, and he's still confident we're going to catch one. I'm just skull depth charging these beers, trying to punish myself into the next day. And he had a take. I was in his bivvy. We were sat side by side, and as his foxy receiver ripped off, it's like a one-toner. You knew it was a carp. It wasn't a tench. And he gave me the old horse bite on the leg like that. He said, "That'll be a carp, son," as he ran off there. And I'm still thinking, probably a tench. It's pissing down at the time as well. And I wait. He's run 30, 40 metres out to his rod. I'm sitting in the bivvy. It's still raining. I'm just waiting for him to get there. See his head torch out there. I was like, "Is it a carp, mate?" And I said, "Is it a tench, mate?" He said, "It's a carp. It's busting me. Get the boat." So
You probably can't believe what's happening. Can
No,
you?
I
Like,
can't,
yeah.
because I was like, I'd been there so long. I in my head, if I wasn't out fishing where I'd been in that little green boat and just caught, we wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
But the conditions had changed. The wind was blowing from where I'd caught that fish, where Constant caught, was blowing from that area to where we were. Suddenly, the situation had changed. We got out in the boat. Obviously, when he hooked it, he's pulled it to where the weed line is, which is 30 foot of water, 400 metres from the bank. Gets out there, it comes out the weed pretty easy when you're directly above it. And in the torchlight, it glue white like a dirty cod. Like it looked big, but I knew it was massive. I knew it was a big carp, but I had no realisation that was going to pop up with scales all over it.
I don't think I certainly didn't know they were like that in there either. I mean, that is a fairly unique looking carp as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say there's a few, not loads. It's not like standard, but there's a few like that in there. And as like a motivator, so you've gone, you're run down, you've been there a long time. As he'd come, caught that fish next to me, I'd watched it from start to finish, from there being what I thought no fish out there, to him placing his rod where he placed it, to the conditions changing, to sit. It all felt possible at that moment, and it was, I needed that, it was.
What was the scene like on the boat when he netted it?
It was so when he had these like 2.5 pound test curve,
free spirits,
they were overly bent in my opinion. Like I thought he was going a bit heavy with it, to the point like the whole tip section was in the water and the spigot, and it was just like, we're in the boat above it, you don't need to pull that hard, it's just going to give up eventually. I was like, go easy mate. He goes, I know my gear. And I was like, which to be fair is his moment. He's been fishing why am I telling him how to play a carp on his gear? Do you know what I mean? But I want him to land it, that's the thing. I wanted him to get it in. And when it went in the net, I remember we fell over in the boat. Like he was like lying on top of me. I had the landing net pole trapped so that the fish couldn't get out, and we were drifting as well, obviously on the wind. It was epic. Yeah.
And you popped it in a bag, and then a few hours later, it looks like that.
Yeah.
Which is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. It was. Yeah, it was absolutely awesome. Like
that's a 60-pounder, was it?
Yeah, that's probably the. I've never felt better about watching someone else catch a carp than that. Like you could be jealous in that moment because it was all my gear and stuff like that I'd planned this big trip. He just knocked out for a short session, but like that's the first bite, or like his first bite, and I'm like, what else is out there? Because I knew nothing other than what I'd seen in Andy Chambers' Carp World. That, like I've got, say at that point I've got 30 pictures of carp from the lake, and then that one pops out and you're thinking, how many more like that are there?
Whereas presumably in Paul's world, that was to be expected, and that's kind of why he went there, and it was always going to happen.
Oh, well, maybe, yeah. It was, and like he was strutting around the old muddy beach, like just like he was like proper proud. It was like it's wicked.
So have you seen that fish before or since?
There's a guy called Jocelyn Dupree, one of the I think he's a Nash sponsored angler. I found a picture on his Facebook or something from years previous. Didn't say how big it was, but I found that a capture of it,
but not since that you know of.
Obviously
you're not going to see everything, or
not see everything, but I would like to think that I'll probably see 75% of what's getting caught.
Never been caught since potentially.
I don't think so. That is an old carp as well, so that's the thing. When there's a lot of the carp are going 10 years or more between captures. You don't know if they're still there, because they could be dead or they could be massive. So, for example, I think it was the year before last, there was a German lad caught a 39 kilo fish, which is an 80, is it 85? Something like that. So I got the picture of it, and then I've trundled through all the old pictures of people that I know that fished it, and I found a picture of it from 2011 from a guy called Patrick Zap. I can't pronounce it. Patrick, he's a bit of a Orient legend. He'd caught it at 56 pound in 2012. So we don't know of any captures between then and now to go from 56 to 85. Now there's 75 pounders that haven't been out as long as that. That's what, because they could be dead.
Yeah,
very possibly could be dead. But there's also the potential that 100-pounder pops up. That is possible. I'm not saying it is there, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility.
What are these fish getting big on, Darrell?
Well, I don't think a lot of them are growing. I think most of them aren't growing, to be honest.
Right.
I think most of them aren't growing because of their quite old fish, and the biomass of the lake has been in a massive transition over the last couple of decades, probably. The weed population, the growth of the weed has allowed for the tench to explode. Because the tench have exploded, they're eating the food that the carp potentially were. And I couldn't even begin to say how many tench are in there. If you wanted to go and catch, if you said to me, right, Darrell, you need to go and catch 100 doubles in a month, I could go and catch 100 doubles in a month at a click of my fingers. Like there's that many of them. They're like
tench.
They're literally like rats. And it doesn't. If you use anything but tiger nuts, anything, then they'll be climbing up the rods within hours of you putting the rigs out. Yeah.
What's the biggest roach you've had out of there? So I'm sure I've seen a picture of it. I'm sure you sent a picture of unhooking one in the edge, like a big rudd. It might have been a rudd, to be fair.
Yeah, I've definitely had 3-pounders. But obviously I'm not fishing for them, but they are there.
And what hook baits are these on?
Double 25s. Like the tench's mouth, like a 7-pound tench in there would take a 30 miller. It's got a big, wide mouth that could easily accommodate that. And I think because there's so many of them, they have to take advantage of whatever's available. Like they see feed, they eat it.
Mad.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge problem now.
Yeah, the bait and weight is history in my opinion. Bait, you cannot, unless you're using like 40 mil concrete boilies, which I just couldn't get my head around because then the carp can't eat them either. I don't think bait hangs around.
In terms of the tactics that you started on that trip, how much do they look like the tactics you still use in terms of rigs and not the way you fish? We're going to talk about how mobile you've become, but let's say that the terminal stuff. The
terminal stuff. So obviously that first year I was fishing in the autumn. So that historically, that's the time when you fish at Orient, where the lake's condensed, the fish are more concentrated in theory. And I was fishing to start with 25 mil boilies, lots of them over them and tiger nuts.
Same hook baits as well?
Yeah, fishing.
Double 25s.
Double 25s. I found that fishing, if you fish with a bottom bait and a wafter, so it laid flat, that slowed the tench down a little bit. When it's standing up straight like that, it's much easier for a tench.
Because they come down like that, don't they?
Come down much.
Vertically,
you definitely catch more tench when they can get it in the mouth like that. And I fished like that in 2016 as well, and in the spring of 2018. And it was only around 2019 when I started fishing more in the spring in the forest, which is a completely different thing to anything that I'd ever read. When you're fishing for fish that are coming into the forest, the tench aren't there, and you can fish with sweet corn. When you're fishing in the forest, you can fish with sweet corn and yellow pop-ups. So you could never fish with yellow pop-ups and sweet corn in open water. It wouldn't even be funny. You might not even get back to the boat with your rig.
Let's park the forest fishing because that's where we're going to wind up, I suppose.
Right.
But you've done the first autumn. You've seen Paul's fish. Did you catch on that trip yourself anymore?
So basically all.
Was that when you found the feature long?
Yeah. So I fished the first 3 weeks. It was all broken up, obviously, but after Paul went, having caught his fish, I then took on his spot and fished at, I think it's 450 metres, and Paul decided rather than fishing to the back of the weed, he'd gone out sort of 50 to 100 metres beyond the limit, so he was more out in the desert. And I fished there for a good week after he went, with the wind hacking in, looked the bollocks, never caught less tench fishing away from the weed, but never actually caught a carp. The realisation came that basically I thought the fish were probably on the dam and in the top right hand corner of the lake. I needed to get as close to that as possible, and I went out one flat calm day looking beyond where I'd been fishing. So the weed stopped at 350. I went out and for another 350, it was just a desert, a 34 foot, flat mud, all the same, nothing interesting. And then suddenly it come up out 34 feet to 23 feet, put some H blocks down like left and right. Could see that it was some sort of road. That's what it felt like. It looked like one end of it run off into the weed. It was consistent 23 foot deep. It was roughly the width of a road, and on the left-hand edge, it fell almost vertically. So it was like almost vertical up, but on the left-hand edge and down the back of it, on the left side, it went down to 44 foot, almost like cavernous. And I remember I H-blocked either end of the beginning of it where it came out of the weed and the end of it where I could see it was like 80 yards apart, like a distance like that. I put 20 Kia Tigers on it before I realised how far it was. Put 5 Kia Boilies, and then I've got my GPS. And I'm like, I've got home marked for the swim. Put the home on, and it said 720 metres. And I was like, I've got 600 on my reels. Yeah, we need to. That's the first problem that needs overcoming. Went to Gigantic. It got dark. Left all my gear set up on the mud. Went to Gigantic to get some braid because obviously I knew they kept a few bits there. Got some spod braid and basically put 300 yards of spod braid onto a reel and then reversed off another one on. So I basically increased my capacity from 600 to about 850 with the backing being floating braid. And from the moment, so obviously didn't fish it the first night because I went to Gigantica, but basically fished probably the best part of a week on that spot. Caught 15 fish.
Opened it up, really?
Yeah, basically I'd fucking found this feature that was the feature very close to where some fish were holding, and at the right, because obviously the time's going on, the water level's going out, the fish are all, not all fish are moving, but some fish are moving in that direction, and a lot by luck, more luck than by judgment, the wind turned into a savage east-northeast wind that was absolutely booming into that area, which on these big pits everyone says that the wind's really important. And I think it is especially important in open water. If you've got a big wind piling into a feature close to a reserve, you know, you're ticking a few boxes there. And yeah, Paul came back during that week when I was catching. He made a comment that, is this fishing, Darrell? Or is it trapping? And I could, you know, even in the highs, like some of the fish that I caught there are to this day the ones that I'm most proud of. He had a point. You know, fishing at 720 metres is so far. Like 350, 500, I think is okay. I think once you're over 500, there's definitely an element of is it ethical? Is it too much? Are you going beyond?
What kind of bites are you even getting at that?
I went out at one time to go and pick my rig up, and there was a 57 pounder on the end. Like me and Paul, so we went out together, took a rod each to wind them in so the pike anglers wouldn't pick them up. And we got like most of the way out there, and Paul went, Dale, I think you need to take this rod, mate. There's something, pull it back. And there was a 57 pound comment on the end of it.
So talk to me about this picture Toby just put up.
So that's the rod out on that feature at 720. That's the floating spod braid at the back. So like you've got 100 odd metres of that out on the surface that's holding it, and then you've got 500 metres of the sinking 15 pound sub braid, 10 ounce gripper on the end to hold, and you're fishing in.
Almost not enough, mate.
Huh?
The 10 ounce. Is 10 ounce enough?
Yeah, it's enough.
Yeah,
it is enough. You're fishing. The key is to fish really, really straight, which the way to do that is on the echo sounder. When you're out on the feature, before you drop your rig, you say go home, and it plots a course line on the screen, and you can have a scale set to like 5 metres. And I would always travel on scale roughly 5 metres upwind, staying as true to that line as possible, and you fish with it as tight as humanly possible. So like that line is whistling like in the wind. It's like, and I had some screamers at that range. Because it's braid, right? Yeah, sooner or later.
Doesn't matter how long it is, there's no stretch.
You've got a belly in it, you know, but sooner or later with braid, there's no stretch. It rips off. But I did have some sort of like, just taking a little bit. But generally, out of those 15 bites, most of them were absolute rippers. And the ones that weren't rippers were generally because I'd come back in high winds and not being able to keep my line as straight as possible. So when they're initially taking, the line's in the weed like this, because you've got 350 metres of weed. If your line's not straight, the fish can pull the line tight within the weed without it registering to the rod top.
I presume that it's just as well the tench were massive, because otherwise you just wouldn't know you had them on, right? Surely.
Well, that initially, like the nylon fishing, I've only landed a couple of the tench. Most of the time, I'm just going out to redo my rods and leads off the clips, and you know, I know that's not carp. You know, I know that a carp would be. Tench do better at getting rid of the rigs. So yeah,
let's have a look at some of the fish from that trip, because obviously these, like you say, they're some of your most memorable.
Yeah.
Fire them up, Tobes. Where's a good one to start?
Yeah,
mate?
well,
So, all of those.
That's the biggest one that I caught. That's, if you remember a little while ago, I was talking about the one that they netted out of that canal and put back into the lake. That is that fish, which was the biggest one of the trip, 62 pounds.
Now, describe this fish to those, especially for those people who are just listening to this. What is it about these carp that make, perhaps you didn't know that they were going to be as sensational as they are, these Orient fish, but it certainly has to be a big reason why you go back, right?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily, I didn't know how cool, because the photography of a lot of people's fish wasn't great, and the stuff that I'd looked to in pre going there, but going there, catching carp like that, and someone can't just go and recreate what you've done. Do you know, like when someone catches a new target fish in the UK, then everyone starts to go and catch that one, and then it's like, I don't want everyone to be able to go and recreate, or like, is that wrong for me to think that? But I want it to be my monster.
Yeah.
Like, that's mine, someone might go and catch it. I'm not saying it's never going to get caught again, but the chances are slim, pretty slim. So it's a unique experience. They're extreme. I wouldn't say not all of them are really old. You wouldn't say that's a really, really old carp. It's not young fish, but it's not really old, but
I'll tell you what, mate. Don't half look like the bulldozer when you look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, that obviously that picture with Leon Hugendijk, it must have inspired generations of certainly continental
Riggsy
anglers,
used to have a picture of it on his tackle box, because in the old days, the biggest carp in the world were caught on lakes such as that. So it was like, it was thought of it by everybody. That was where if you want to catch the biggest carp in the world, you've got to catch it from a lake like that. Mm-hmm. Whereas it's not like that now, which for me has sort of diluted it a little bit.
I mean,
that's one with a scar on it. Obviously, I caught the one with the scar of it, and that's 62 on the same night, on the same rod, on the same side. I caught the 57 first, and at the time of catching that, put it into the sling, put it into the edge, and for me that was the trip made. I caught 50s en route to that, but that was the one. Obviously I see it as I'm putting it into sling. I was like, my God, that is a carp. Like, that is, Paul caught his one, that was my one. At that point I was like, it's took me a month to catch it, but that has made it worthwhile.
Similar head to Paul's, that one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what's the story with the big scar, do you know?
Well, I think tethered. I think tethered to line.
But exceptional condition they're all in as well.
The mouth. So I'm yet to catch one that I can see any evidence
of it ever having been caught.
Yeah, I'm not saying that because I've caught carp that have been caught, but because when they get caught at a big size, and their mouths are not soft like a lot of young carp have got really soft mouths. And I think the damage happens to them quite early, whereas their mouths are very rubbery. You don't get hook pulls at Orient. Like it's. I think I've lost one ever. Right. Like hook pull. I've lost them for other reasons.
Yeah.
But when the hook goes in, it doesn't come out, and it doesn't move in their mouths. It's like very so. It's nice to catch carp that don't look like they've been mauled.
That one, yeah. See, that looks to me a lot more like your Andy Chambers sort of fish, the longer mirrors with those.
That's what I would refer to as a fish that there's fish that. Fish do get around the whole lake, but there's also, like, around the barrage, there's a lot of long, skinny mirrors like that. Like around that end of the lake, I see them, but the ones that get caught from Bivvy City, they tend to be more longer, thinner ones that get caught. I don't know why. Like, I'm not saying they don't all swim around the lake.
It's probably big though, still, that one, isn't it?
That's a 50.
Right.
That's the one that I caught when my car was on fire. I didn't know it was on there. I'd put the rod out in the evening after catching, and the echo sounder / course plotter died halfway back. So then I'm just driving out a torchlight in the dark, and you're never going straight. And even because the torch is always in front of you. Well, no matter what the boat's doing, the light is always in front. So basically, got back to the bank, put the rod on the rest. Woke up in the morning at 5 o'clock because I knew I had to reel it in before the pike anglers get out there. Went out, found my line snagged 2/3 of the way out there. The braid was, no, more than that, 3/4 of the way out there. braid was snagged in 30 foot of water. Tried to free it, wouldn't come free. Couldn't break it by pulling. Didn't realise I had a take, just thought the line was snagged. Screwed the clutch up as tight as I could, put the boat in reverse and drove off, and suddenly I could feel the line sliding like that coarse sensation. And then as it cut through something, then a branch came up, I untangled the branch, and then £50.
We're in. No way. Did you, when you took the pictures, did you know your car had been burnt out at that point?
So I missed a bit of the story. Obviously, when I was out there playing the fish, on the horizon, I could see it looked like a sunrise, but a different, like it looked like a sunrise, as in it was glowing in the corner of the lake, not just in the direction of the car park, but the particular corner of the car park where the vehicles were thing. And then there was like, it all sounds a bit far-fetched, but there was multiple explosions. Like, I'm not saying there was fireballs powering into the sky like meteors, but there was explosions coming from, you could see the flames, the orange like rising with the booms. And I went to Gaz and I said to him, like, I think the cars are on fire. And his response was, what the fuck am I going to do about it? Right. That was like by the time I got back to the bank, and I thought, that is a pretty fair response, to be fair. If the cars are on fire and they're exploding, then they are. And they were a good 1,500 metre walk through the mud. So I just went to bed, and the next thing I know, the police were in the swim asking if we had vehicles parked over there, and that's that.
Do you have a view to this day? Because obviously you'll never know, will you? But what went on with that?
Basically, so I was on a point called Point de Terriers, and then the Three Tree Island was behind that. There was an English guy from the army. Who's Dan's PA who used to work here?
Tim Gray.
It's a friend of Tim Gray, was on the point behind me, and he messaged me when I started catching, and I posted the 62-pounder on Facebook or Instagram. Like, I was buzzing. Like, that, for me, it was I was made that night. It didn't matter really what happened from there on in, which was a mistake. You know, I could have milked that for a lot more. But this guy that was behind me, he said that the French guy next to him was really upset with how far out I was fishing. Him saying I was fishing at 900 metres, which was a bit of an exaggeration. And then one particular day I went to put my rods out, and I got halfway to my spot, glanced round, and there was a man in my swim. And bear in mind, I'd been on that point for a month and not seen anyone. I couldn't work out how he'd managed to get down. It's like 1,500 metre walk out to the end of this point. He'd snuck from the back of the island, and he wanted to see where I was going. Obviously, I turned around and seen him in my swim, doubled back. And I wasn't rude, but I gave nothing. You know, I was just like, yes, no. I know that you've been slagging me off to the English guy over there. Mm-hmm. You're having nothing. And my car got burnt the next day, and he'd gone. So, yeah. You can't prove.
No, of course not.
You know, like the locals or the French anglers, they're all adamant that it's because I'm not in a fishing lake car park there. I'm in a public car park near the beach where people park for the beach. And you get people just going there smoking joints, doing whatever. They've been sat there a long time. So it could easily have been kids. And the police in the newspaper, they even said that a charger, like a little power pack, had caught fire inside my car and caught the other car on fire, which, as much as I'd say it's 50-50, it was the angler or it was the public, but I don't believe that my car caught fire itself, because I don't think it would have set fire to the one next to it. I don't think that's possible.
Okay. How did you, internally, when that's happening, you look pretty relaxed, but did it make you double down on your sort of resolve to go back and do it better again?
It was pretty irrelevant, really. Like, it wasn't like a fire. It wasn't like fire, I'm going to go and show you. It wasn't like that at all. It was, at the time, I found it funny that I thought it had added an element to the story. You know, obviously, for want of a better expression, I'm a professional angler. I write about what I do. It does add a certain bit to it. The most painful bit about it was that the passport was in the car, and I had to get driven to Paris to get a temporary passport. That was very difficult, and put the bailiffs from Gigantic had to run me around, so I was a bit of a burden. You know, without their help, I'd have been in real big trouble. Like, it'd been a totally different thing. Not being collected by them in a work van, taken to Paris to get a temporary passport, getting picked up by a Korda employee and taking me home, made it less painful. You know, if you was all on your own without those contacts, it could have been much worse. Say you, like you're down to your last pennies, how are you going to get to Paris in the first place and stuff? It could have been a disaster.
In terms of the way that you spent your days, you had lads visit, like Gaz visited. It's a perfect picture.
That picture
actually.
couldn't have been better timed.
So you had Gaz visit, Paul visited, but there's these vast tracts of time when it's just you.
Yeah.
And you're looking at this. Just describe this scene. Is it that we see on the screen here?
Basically, after Paul went, the weather was what you would call good fishing weather. I now had this bit of info of Paul's capture. I sat it out believing that this was now I'm ticking the boxes. I'm on the fish, I've got the spot, got the weather, I'm going to catch one. And when you're on the mud and it rains, if it's sunny, the mud's fine to be bivvied up on. But when it rains a lot, the environment changes quickly, dramatically, and you can do your best to have a ground sheet and keep it out, but you're walking in and out, it very quickly become disgusting, like really bad. And there was lots of hours went by, days went by where it took a lot to stay. It would have been much easier. So you got to pack it away, it's minging anyway, but like I could have given up on multiple occasions because I kept catching tench, and it's not like you could put the rods out and you've done it once. But when you can repetitively doing the same, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I was getting the same result whilst fishing in really, really uncomfortable conditions. I don't know if I put the picture of my finger on there, but there's the mud obviously gets on everything, gets onto your hands, and it sucks the light. My fingers literally just started cracking. And
that clay, the very fine clay, is going to
moisture
draw the moisture out.
Yeah. And you got hours in the day when you're not fishing, because I was only putting my rods out at night for the pike hangers. I was smoking countless cigarettes. That's literally like, in hindsight, probably taking time off of my life drilling rollies and drinking a fair few of those stubby beers, not eating very much. Like I lost 25 pounds on that session from start to finish. Didn't notice it at the time because I wasn't eating a lot. Carrying batteries up and down the beach. I was walking them through the mud to the car and driving them to Gigantica every couple of days. I was like changing over batteries. But I do remember my trousers kept falling down when I was carrying these batteries. I couldn't, at the time, I didn't put two and two together. I just thought I'd had these trousers on for so long, I just bored them out a little bit. But the truth was, I lost 25 pounds, which is, for anybody, is a considerable amount of weight.
Were you on the Hombeek diet of like hot dogs still?
It was like ham and cheese rolls and just, maybe some hot dogs and stuff, but like keeping the costs as low as humanly possible, I'm not really
when you've got to spend your money on beer as well. So
well, the beer in France is so cheap. People say, do you save when you stop smoking? Do you save any money? It's like, rolling tobacco costs nothing, and those stubby beers, I think you get a case of 30 or 28 or something, 26, and then they're like €7. It's not a financial thing, but technically you're poisoning yourself. Like, as much as it numbs the pain a little bit, you are poisoning yourself with alcohol, eating crap food, not really drinking any water. I might have shaved a bit of time off my existence.
Mentally, how are you staying in the game though? Because there must, you're drinking, right? So it comes with its highs and its lows.
Yeah.
At its worst, how close were you to folding? Was it simply the ag of packing up the capture there? Or do you go somewhere else?
Deep down, like inside, I trust myself to notice something. Something. Fishing's about watercraft, isn't it? Like, a lot of captures come as a result of a sighting or reaction to something happening, and that is just what I constantly. Whenever I felt down, demotivated, hungover, considering leaving, I just, like, it will come good. If you can hang long enough, like, it will come good.
Because nothing in your English fishing could ever have prepared you for this, no matter how long you'd stayed at the Met or whatever it was.
You can't compare that. The North Met is a 60-acre lake. You can walk round it, see fish from a bird hut. You can see them in the edge. You can see them swimming on the end of the wind. North Met was very underfished when I fished there. I wasn't heavily pressured, but like the North Met was a cakewalk compared to that. Like, obviously as well, I'd never fished a big lake like that. Location is everything in fishing, but when your location is based on not seeing them, you've got a problem. You've instantly got a problem. So I can't really compare. Obviously, I've done a 30-night blank at Yateley before I caught anything. I've done a 30-night blank. I've done a couple of 30-night blanks at Coninbrook. Done 30-night blank at St Ives at times. And again, it's the same mentality in that you just need to believe that one sighting, one reaction changes everything. One capture can catapult. Like that first bite, the first bite that I had off that feature on that session, I lost. Which after a month of waiting for it, I lost my first bite. Snapped the hook link. I tied a figure of 8 loop in something that was something I never did normally in my fishing, but I thought it was a good idea. But I remember waking up, massive hangover after losing that fish, staring out there, all the rods wound in, waves hacking in. I was like, I'm going to catch now. Like fuck the lost one. I've had a bite there. First night I put my rig there, it's going again. It's going. So yeah, the mentality is just to always believe that, trust yourself that you will notice something. If you can stay long enough, something will happen. You'll react, and your fortunes can change.
I mean, that's the 62 again, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had asked you to describe it. I mean, let's do. It's very yellow, hell of a tail. They're lovely tails, aren't they? And lovely heads.
Yeah. Like massive long barbels. You can't actually see it as well. On its other nostril, it had this like weird thing hanging, like I can't even describe.
It's the nares.
Yeah, like
sometimes they're on the outside.
Yeah, massive ones.
The
like all lying down its face,
on
its cheek and that. But yeah, that day, put it like it's the best part of 4 foot long, if not 4 foot long. I didn't measure it, but you're talking a really long carp, not overly deep, not overly thick.
Great shoulder though, look as well.
Good shoulder. Like I would say that's like a medium proportion with a bit of an arse on it.
Yeah.
Would you say like a medium with a bit of a back end?
Yeah.
Whereas the 57 was a slightly deeper fish, but probably not as arse endy, a little bit thicker. But yes, I remember when I
mouth, mate, like you said it, but that particular shot where it's fully projected.
Well, I was going back to like when I was saying it's a little bit unethical fishing at 700. When I caught the 57 scarred one before that, replaced the rig, came back to the bank. The other rod had already gone. There was a 29 pounder on that. By the time I got back, I'd only been in the swim a couple of minutes when that one thundered off. And when you're fishing at 700 in a crosswind, I had a 55 pound engine on, full bore to meet in the leader knot. So I've got a leader knot that's 15 meters long, full bore to meeting it at 700 is probably 20 minutes, which
there's no fight.
That's not fight.
No.
That's the hand I'm winding as fast as I can with the engine on full tilt, with a tiller under my armpit to keep the boat straight, rod's pointing, I'm pulling, I'm winding down, I'm pulling, I'm winding in. You don't actually, you feel a weight, even with braid, but you're not feeling kicking. The leader knot goes on the reel. And as the lead knot goes on the reel, cut the engine, because you know you're out in the desert playing it. And I remember this as the lead, because you're looking at the rod and the line. Lead knot come on, cut the engine, and I'd actually overtaken the fish on a bit of a course. So I've gone past it, and as I've turned the boat like that, I can just see its mouth sticking out the waves. It was really, really windy that night, and it's just like it's done. It's been fighting for its life out there on the end of my line, and I've not
felt a thing.
I literally just went up to it I put the engine on, turned the boat round, and just drove up to it and just scooped it up on the wind was blowing it towards me because I was driving into the wind, and it just like scooped it up on the way past. It was like a mouth like that, you know, like a cup-sized mouth sticking out the surf.
You caught quite a few commons, but I don't know why I never expected the Orient fish to be commons, because all the pictures you used to see were mirrors.
Yeah, I think they're of a different stocking. I think the really, really old fish of the Orient are the mirrors, and I think the commons are of a later stocking.
Oh, get that leather up, mate. So what's the story with these little guys? I say little, it's probably 40 pounds.
He's 39.
Is it? Yeah. Look at him.
He's like the dustbin, isn't he? He's
yes.
Like super, super cool. Again, never seen him before or since.
I mean, that is a leather, isn't it? Looking at
that is
a scale.
Yeah, that's a leather. That one. There's a reasonable head of leathers in Orient. Like those a fair
brown.
They've been
grey,
well cooked,
like,
as in they've been in
of course.
you've caught them in the middle of the night, and I've been awake most of the night, and you fall asleep, and you're sometimes waking up like 9-10 o'clock in the morning and doing the pictures. So they've been in the.
Are these special fish to you, like, or do they just become part of the bigger picture?
Yeah, they mean as much to me as any of the stuff that I've done in the UK. You know, like obviously we've talked about the Yateley stuff hundreds of times over the years, blah blah blah, and it was great because it was the first time catching a 40-pounder. It was Yateley Car Park. It was catching it next to Terry Hearn, bloody blah. But like in hindsight, knowing what I know now, you know, Yateley Car Park is a pussy green pond in comparison. You know, they've got the competition is from the anglers, and if you can be in the right swim at the right time with a little bit of watercraft and technical know-how, you can catch those fish. And people are taking their turns on them. You know, there's 50 pictures of each of those fish knocking around, whereas like you looked at that, you say, oh, that's a lovely fish. You know, you ain't going to see that anyone else holding that. You might do, but it's very unlikely. You know, so because of that, that's why they mean what they mean, because they're mine. They're not.
Are these self takes?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
What percentage of that trip? So you were out there for 3 or 4?
5 weeks.
5 weeks.
5 weeks in total. Paul fished 2 short weeks. There might have been like 5 nighters or something. Paul fished in that time.
Leather, yeah. Is that potentially an older fish, Darrell? It looks kind of a bit older at that level.
Yeah, again, that was 39. There was 2 39s levers. That's what's not a lever. It's got a scale on it, that one. But it was probably a genetic lever, that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But there was 2 like that. I think there was 4 50s and a 60. So there was a 50-pound mirror, a 52-pound mirror, a 57 common that was a bit of an ugly one, like a bit of a pig, the nice 57 and the 62.
I mean, so in terms of result, you've gone from the depths of you know, despair and like despondency to turned it round, and you've had a right result.
But that's well, a minute ago when we were saying why did you hang in there? That is that, isn't it? Like, so
the colours in it, mate. I mean,
yeah, that is in the very definition of suddenly realising that you're catching tench on the back of the weed. That it's not going to, carp are not going to come there. You need a feature. You need a feature close to barrage reserve. The wind, those things all culminating to, you know, once I found that spot, I had it in my GPS. It's just a case of putting it on the spot and going to bed, you know, and then the rod goes.
Are you an angler that's able to take to sort of be mindful about what's happening to you when it's happening, or do you only ever appreciate stuff once you're at home looking at the photos? Like, were you able to find within that session moments that weren't just carp that you thought, I'm loving this?
Yeah, the 57, when I caught the scarred 57 and that 62, the morning, you know, it happened in the night, like the vision of that, those lips sticking out the water, the vision of that scar as I zipped that sling up on the 57, wake up in the morning, seeing the sack pole there, the cord coming off of it, turned up, fired the stove over on my own, looked at the pole, I was like, and that's what you came for. Like everything, like I'd caught 50s on the lead up to that, but that night was the night that made the trip what it was. And yeah, there's just the grin, you know, on your face. Like I remember calling, because I'd self-taked a lot of the fish. Paul took that one, but I'd self-take.
That's the uglier common, is it?
No, that's the 52. There's an uglier 57. That's similar shape.
Certainly uglier than the other two anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, calling the bailiffs from Gigantica to do the pictures rather than self-taking them. That's...
Because it's not always visible in your like writings and stuff that you are finding those moments of like pleasure within the result.
Yeah, different captures mean different things. Like the value of something is determined by how you feel about something, possibly. The month those captures might not have meant if I'd caught them in the first week. The fact that I had to suffer, go through the blanking, I think for me is why I feel so strongly about them, because I had to suffer. No one showed me that spot. It wasn't like if someone had took me under the wing like I wanted them to, they might not have meant quite as much. But the fact that I had to suffer, done it all by myself. I learnt to use the boat. I learnt to use the Echo Sander. I found that feature. Special.
And when you got home, did you find, you know, when you showed people, did they get it? Could anyone else understand what you'd been through there?
I think some people, like my friend Phil the Can, I think he gets it. You know, he's older, so he appreciates the history of it. I think the younger generation don't. I don't think, like, if you're 30, I don't think that you are aware of the standing of that lake of its time. And I don't think you can really comprehend it without having been there, in my opinion. You know, I like people say, "Oh, you're bigging it up a bit, aren't you? You're bigging it up." Of course you are, because you're the one that's caught them. You're trying to make your captures sound meaningful. But I've caught big carp at home. I've caught big carp from small ponds. I've caught them from commercial ponds. That's as good as
You're
it gets.
sort of swimming against the tide to a degree, because presumably you come home and everyone just wants to talk about English carp fishing, and you're like, well, this is something different.
Good though. Like that's one of the best things about that, is that people can't just go and do it. Obviously, there's the investment equipment, the massive amount of time. I'm sat here talking about it, but I'm not too worried that, like, next year suddenly when I go fishing, there's going to be loads of people
you wouldn't have done it. You're aware of your own impact on these sort of things, aren't you? Presumably you've written a book about it at the end of the day. So it's a managed risk. Yeah.
If people want, the thing about public lake fishing is that I like about it is it is available to all. You take one of the getting tickets in the UK is having the right tickets.
Let's be honest, you have fallen down in the past on that, haven't you? You know, and perhaps it hastened your the fact you go abroad, because
getting tickets, it can make you, if you've had the right tickets, you can suddenly have a great CV, can't you? A great CV of captures if you can't get the tickets. Whereas I like the fact that this is available to all, but it sort of isn't. You know, it separates the ones that you've got to be committed. You go in there for a weekend.
Flood of English anglers going, do you?
No, you do get some. You know, and I
always has been some.
Yeah, I do get some messages from people that are going and stuff. But yeah, I like that it's available to all.
I've just thrown that back up there for a reason as well, just to give a
some scale.
Yeah, some scale. Everyone listening and or watching, that's I've marked each end or furthest point, if you like, each end of the lake. That's 6.5 kilometres. That's so. I'm aware you won't have fished on that level, but that just gives an idea of what you're trying to approach.
I mean, and also, Tobe, when you take into account the how convoluted that bank side is, the actual amount of bank space, not fishable bank space presumably, Darrell, but the amount of bank space is colossal compared to 6 kilometres. It must be.
That doesn't even do it. I'd like to see that. That's mad.
Historically, people go there or have gone there in the autumn because you're taking that element, what you're talking about, out of it. The fish become more concentrated. You're fishing deeper naturally, and the fish are funneled. But in my mind, it'd be very difficult to stop fish swimming with bait, and I don't think they do. I think you catch fish when they're in an area, when they want to be in that area. I personally find it very difficult to comprehend, or certainly do myself, is to place baits for passing fish. That, for me, that sounds...
It's not really a bit you're angling either, is it?
Feels far-fetched, that does to me. You know, it's like a needle in a haystack. You know, I like it to be more probable. You know,
especially when and the bigger the lake, the more you need that to be zeroed in and be right. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. So between the first trip and the second trip, what did you change? What were the things that you came away and thought, I need this? I don't need that.
I needed a bivvy boat
straight away. Did you?
Yeah, instantly. Yeah, you know, because I'd gone from fishing 350 metres out, which is further than I've ever fished in my life, to fishing 720 metres out, to thinking, is this even ethical? Because I'm not even fighting them. I'm basically trapping them to a line that I'm then going scooping them up on. I didn't like that. You know, I wanted it to be more intimate than that. So I immediately went out, bought an inflatable with a bivvy on it that you could put a bed chair inside. I went back in 2016 to fish.
And is that the autumn again? You waited a whole year?
Yeah, so I went back to go and fish in the autumn again. My idea was I'd just go and anchor up on that feature. That I thought that feature was like, for everyone listening to that, thinking, I wonder where that feature is. I bet they're all like people that will be going there. I want to know where that feature is. I've never caught a carp off there again since. Right. And I've been going there since. It's 2023 now. I've been there 10, 11, 12 times. And I've never caught a carp off that feature since. So, but I thought I'd get my bivvy boat. I'd go back, I'd fish on that feature and catch. Blanked miserably. tried a little go on Michelin 3, which is an area, it's no longer a night zone now, but it was at the time. It's where Andy Chambers done really well. Had a little go there, caught nothing, and then ended up fishing in the barrage reserve, which isn't allowed. Caught pretty well and got caught, got fined, and that was, in my mind, the end of that. You know, there's always that barrage reserve is in the autumn. There's always carp there. You know, like certain features have carp on different years, different bays come into their own on different years. The barrage has always got carp along it, because it's got a 400 metre perimeter that you're not allowed within. The lack of boat traffic means that obviously it's a sanctuary where they feel safe. And secondly, more probably just as importantly as it's a sanctuary, the dam wall is packed with like cannonball sized cobbles at the base of the mud to the concrete to stop it eroding away, which I think is a natural, brilliant area in a lake that's just mud, vast mud deserts. I think this 50, I don't know how long the wall is, I think it's a couple of kilometres, something like that. Like having that mass of cobbled stones in a sanctuary, I think it's like a magnet for fish. And yeah, I fished there a few nights in 2016. Had some very prolific nights, but yeah, basically got greedy, stayed into the hours of daylight and was caught and paid.
And quite often is it the pike anglers that do the kind of the you know, they're the eyes on the water?
Yeah, they are eyes on the water, but also you have what I think the term is barrage technician.
Okay.
Because in the autumn there's basically a plug. You've got like probably a wheel they spin that lets the level come out. They know whatever level the lake is. They know that the rate that it's coming out. They're constantly monitoring that. And the barrage reserve is a reserve because they don't want you on the barrage. But I think it's to do with like a terrorism.
Of course, yeah.
If you blew the dam, then you could flood.
Yeah.
I don't know what that amount of water could do, but yeah, you're not allowed on the barrage for safety of the barrage. So
it's a fair cop. You've done, you know.
Yeah. To be honest, it was shooting fish in a barrel to a degree. It's sort of, you know, when something's too easy, like the ones that I caught from the bank at 700, they meant a lot more to me than the ones that I caught in 2016. You know, it was quite easy, you know, because you haven't got to find a feature. You're basically fishing on the slope of the barrage. The guards at that time were old boys that only ever came if they were called. So there's if a pike angler called, they might come a day later. So you could be in and out and gone. But yeah, it's not like that now.
I noticed earlier when you talked about the lake, you said you know it was very much a we know of these fish. So you're obviously part of a community now that talks about the Orient, and that must include French people and others.
Yeah.
How does that sort of manifest itself? Like, how are you in touch with these people?
Well, it's the changing exchange of information. You know, like Constant is probably the most knowledgeable guy of Orient. You know, not just because of the time that he's fished there, but because of having worked in the tackle shop. You know, he's like the oracle of the lake. And even after knowing him since 2016, I've made videos on his lake. I've spent nights at his house. He still doesn't give me everything. You know, he doesn't. And I don't think anyone gives everyone. Like everyone wants a little bit of something. But for example, Constant has got. Constant has on his GPS system. He has the map of the lake, like a chip, like a card, like a sim, that's got the depth map. So he can literally drop a pin on any feature on the lake and take himself to that feature. Now, he wanted to sell this Echo Sounder. He said, do you want to buy it? I said, yeah, I'll have it if it's got the card in it. He's like, no. so like he helps me, and he's taught. I've learned an awful lot from Constant, but at the same time, he doesn't give me everything. You know, you still have to.
Yeah. That's quite. I mean, you'd respect that, wouldn't you? So
that's the thing. Like, I get loads of messages from people that are going to Orient asking me stuff about it, and I'm open to a degree, but I don't discuss exactly where I fish because I don't want to go there and find someone. But if you've caught fish and you can tell me something that I don't know, then we can trade. You know. But at the same time, I'm 100 or 150 nights, 160 nights deep of graft. I've earned my captures. And I shouldn't have to give that away without something in return.
No, and people will understand that. So the bivvy boat was bought.
Yeah.
What else? What else had you changed into 2016? Rigs, baits,
big boilies. Like trying to get around the tench. I was like fishing really big baits, like 35 mil hook baits.
Are you making them yourself?
Yeah. Fishing them over 25 millers. No, I think actually
just found the boat.
Yeah, Kev. There's a picture of it on the trailer, I think, with a red garage in the background where you can see it pretty good.
So you've obviously invested in is that a Torpedo engine?
Yeah, Torpedo engine. It was quite an investment. Like I think the trailer was £1,500. The bivvy boat was like £2,500. The engine was £1,500. The batteries were £1,000 each. There was like a big investment of kit that I bought over the winter of 2015. I think I certainly was thinking about buying it then from Iron Verkulen. And yeah, I think it was. I went with Beadle to start with in that September, but it was that was. I can't remember what the question was now. I'm waffling.
Oh, what you changed?
Oh, so obviously bought that bivvy boat, fishing bigger hook baits. So started with the Snowman as before. When I was fishing in the barrage reserve, I caught a lot of fish that year in 2016, but not many big ones.
Is this what you were saying about the skinny mirrors? Was that where?
Yeah, I was catching a lot of them, like fish up to 47, like 35 to 47. And that was like a normal fish, and I caught a lot of them. And bear in mind, in that first session, I had 5 over 50 out of 15. So I had over 30 fish without a 50 on one of these sessions. And then I started fishing. I think is there a picture of the lighter with the 3 boilies on it?
We should see some of the rigs anyway.
They're like boilies, golf ball sized boilies, and I was fishing them as snowmen rigs. And I caught 2 50s right at the end in 2016 before fishing them as snowmen. And that was just basically what happened.
Is that they're Benoffies? They're your standard issue?
Yeah, they're either Cell or Benoffies. I think they're Benoffies. Yeah.
Size of
I reckon you could freeline one of them 80 yards. They're they're real weighty.
And you're fishing 2 on a hair. 2 of those.
One of them and a 24 mil. I was cutting the top off to make a flat edge and putting a 24 mil.
Made all the difference, presumably. That the nice neat fit.
Yeah, I'm sure that the calf in there are turning their nose up at that. But like to catch those 250s after catching loads of smaller ones, they kept the rig stayed in place long enough for a bigger one. You know, I imagine the little ones might have had a go at it. Might have thought, I don't know, but they.
Easier food elsewhere. Why am I bothering?
Maybe.
Well, have we got shots, Tobes, of the bigger fish from that trip? And looking at is that a bit of carpet? That's the bivvy boat behind.
That's the first bivvy boat.
What was life afloat actually like? How did you find it?
That boat was really uncomfortable for a big lad like me. I've seen my mate Trevor's got that boat now, and he loves it. It's for a terrier and a Nigel Sharp, that sort of size fella, nice, but for someone who's 6'3", 6'4", cramped up in there, the bed didn't go in there width way, so it went in the length way, so you're never really sitting at the right angle.
Turning, you having to twist to see the rods and stuff.
Yeah, it was, not comfy really. It was,
but a new adventure though, right? Yeah,
totally different to anything that I'd ever done in the past. Again, you at the start of those sessions in 2016.
Just give you an idea.
So there's you and Dave, like.
I had the runs on that trip. I'd had some bad hand, like they'd been in the cool box, right? And I had a bad tummy for a few days, and I was having to climb out of the big boat into the little one, pull it to the side, and like go in a bucket or over the side while he's within like earshot. I'm absolutely dying, like dehydrated and stuff. Great. We were day fishing on that. We were sleeping in Bivvy City and then going out and fishing, doing day sessions on
and that was working though.
Yeah, but we caught really good.
So these fish from
that's one of the 50s when I put on the big hook baits. That was 54, and that one's 55.
I see the 54. Seeing both, to be fair. I just feel like I've seen him. Yeah, he's not as remarkable as some of the other commons.
No, that's what I mean. But
for me, that's a cool carp as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's got. I mean, I'm pretty colourblind, but it looks like it's got some interesting tones to it.
It's brown. It's chocolatey brown in colour. They're not. From my experience in the autumn, they're not as nicely coloured as they are in the spring. When they go deeper in the water, I don't think they're as dark. When you see them in the spring in the forest and stuff, a lot of them are black, like really black.
Do you think there's a correlation between how long your beard was and how many big ones you caught? Because you've shaved it off there and you aren't doing as well.
Well, I on that session I was back and forthing. Like I wasn't there I fished 6 weeks that autumn, I think. But like different sessions, I was back rather than sitting it out for one. Me and Natalie were trying for a baby at the time, so I was having to be
keep it in check.
I had to be home on certain ovulation days and whatnot. So,
which were your favourite? Can you think of a favourite one? Would it have been these ones from that?
No. The better fish. There's I don't know if I put any pictures of Dave up. Dave caught a couple of nice 47s. There's I caught a quarter linear. Sorry, go back. Yeah. That one's super cool.
Yeah, the common. Let's go look at the common as well. Yeah,
so that common was 48. Like that's what you
small tail, like
classic carp, isn't it? That's almost like the red mire ones that are in the mere.
But these are not fish that you would expect to see in France, particularly.
No, super cool that one.
Not doing France down in any way by that. They're not big plain mirrors, are they? So
yeah, that's the only one that I've ever repeat captured out of there. I caught that in 22 again.
Did you?
And it was smaller. It was 46 rather than 48.
As if. But I mean, who cares? Look at it.
Have you got the linear there, Toad?
Yeah, next one up, wasn't it?
The linear's not a great photo, if I'm honest. It's too tight.
Well, the half lin as well.
That's 47.
Is that the one?
No, it's the next one up. Oh no, go on, keep going. That one.
But this one is quite a friendly carp.
Are you bringing these back to the bank to photo?
Yeah.
You can't do it in the boat, sort of.
You could do, but caught it at night, fishing where I shouldn't have been fishing, so I wasn't going to be far in the flesh.
What white tips again, like Paul's? Is that a common thing on there?
Some of them, like I don't know if that's where they've been in the bag a little bit. It definitely seems to like they've got white fringe into the fins anyway, but I think it intensifies. Like they get more colour on them when they've been in the bag for a while. I think they get I think that happens on the other big lakes. I think it is a bit of a trait of the fish, but I think it sort of does. Escalate once it's been in the bag a while.
I mean, zips, like you don't associate zip linears with France, do you? Particularly, I'm not sure I've seen any.
That's £39 that one. But there's a fish that lives on the barrage. I say it lives on the barrage. The only captures I know of it are from the barrage. The first capture that I saw of it, it was £46. It was a summer capture, an empty capture. The first time I ever saw it, it was on a CC Moore advert. But I've seen a picture of it since at 58, and it's a zip linear like that with like a big cluster above and a big cluster below, so it's like two big it's probably one of the nicest carp that I've ever seen.
Much as you'd gone there thinking I want to catch fish no one's caught before, have there since been fish that you're like, as they appear, you're like, no, I want him?
No, because I don't think it's possible to well, obviously it is possible, but I don't think it's, if you start to have that mindset with the lake, as in I'm trying to catch an individual carp, I think it would take, for me, that's not what that's about for me. Like I want to enjoy each session as an adventure, and enjoy each capture for what it is. Don't get me wrong, when I've caught ones that I knew existed and caught, I've enjoyed them, but I would never be arrogant or confident enough to say I'm going to that lake to catch that fish. Like for me, there's a 74 pounder that Andy Chambers' friend caught on one of his sessions. I think it was 2013. I haven't seen it since, but for me that's always been the one in the back of my mind that I wonder if it's still there. You know, like that's the one you think, oh, I wonder if it's still there. Is it bigger? Is it the same size? But there's a few. When I went in 2006, I think the biggest fish of the carp match was a 40 or a 50, I can't remember exactly, but there was a mirror that came out in the carp match. And then on my session in 2015, somebody else caught that same fish on my 2 trips, been the same mirror caught. On the second time, it was 68 pounds. And it came out 2020, I think, or 2021, I think it was 72. So it's like, there's fish in there that I think about, I've got numerous pictures.
I think that's all I meant, by the way, not targeting them as such, but as they crop up, you're like, oh, I wouldn't mind him. Like,
well, that linear I was just going on about, the triple row one. I know he lives. There's someone sent me a picture of it from the barrage. One of the barrage technicians photoed it sitting in the edge.
Oh, really?
And it's just fucking incredible, man. But I know that to try and catch that fish, I would have to fish illegally, and I'm.
Well, you're too deep now, aren't you, into the lake? Like, you
I don't want to get
banned.
Yeah. No, I don't want to get. They've changed guards. But when I first started fishing, there was 3 old boys on there, and they only came out if they had to. Whereas now there's some ex-army man that's basically been employed by the chairman of the club, and the chairman of the club has got his like fringe guys that are out on the water all the time, who are then, whenever there's a carp bivvy boat or anywhere it shouldn't be, it's phoned in with a GPS point, and army man comes out in the middle of the night and just has you. And a few men, basically it's a 2-year ban now and a €400 fine, whereas when I got caught it was €130 fine, slap on the wrist. But I know now that if I was to be caught doing something I shouldn't be, I'd be banned for 2 years, which would be painful. And like I said, those captures don't mean as much to me having caught them in the way that I did.
Painful because of what Orient now means to you?
Yeah, I don't know how long it will go on for. I think at some point the boats might get stopped. Carp fishing from boats could get stopped because more people are doing it. More people are pushing the boundaries and stuff. Obviously, I've been fishing there on and off since 2015, getting older. I love it. It's brilliant. But nothing good lasts forever. That's, you get bored of stuff.
But you never quite know where you are within that cycle. It might be getting better now then drops away. Who knows?
Yeah, it could be. Like £100 could suddenly come out of there, and then it'll get really busy with serious guys, and then it might lose its thing for me, because it's not as much as I'd love to catch a done on a £100. I'm really happy each year going there. When I leave home, if I come home with a £50 that I've not seen before, for me that's a real success, like a real.
And how often do you catch them that no one's seen, that Constant's not seen? Is that regular still?
Maybe 50% of the big ones that come out. No, maybe 40% of the big ones that come out.
So you're still breaking ground.
Yeah, really big ones are. You're more likely to find a shot of them. More likely
because they're older, right? Simple as that.
But it's I would say an unknown 30 kilo fish, which is the benchmark of a monster. Like a 20 kilo is a big fish on a public water. A 30 kilo from one of those Champagne region lakes is the pinnacle of carp fishing, in my opinion. There's fish of that size coming out yearly that have never been seen before. You can't compare what's in Darrell to Orient, as in I think there's hundreds of 30 kilo fish in Darrell now, hundreds of 30 kilo fish, and not just 30 kilos, there's multiple 35 kilo and a handful maybe of 40 kilos. So you're talking like that's the
biggest carp in the world, wild.
Yeah, that's a different level. You're talking, that's the pinnacle. But I'd much rather fish wherever I fucking want for a £50 than have to wait it out in a swim that I booked for £100. So like it's
kind of not what you're going there for. You went there for freedom, and you'd be going backwards.
Yeah, you sort of.
Freedom in inverted commas. Freedom's maybe a bit overused now, but
more of an adventure. I want to, like I say, finding them is almost as much like that realization of they're here, I'm here, no one's anywhere near me, I'm going to catch, because when you find them, you generally do catch one.
I think we should spin through a few of the years, mate, and just maybe pick up on a few of the highlights and a few of the points that made your fishing different.
Well, I was just going to say, I was going to ask, do you mind if I throw a picture up? Because it's not often that I find one that.
We're going to lose a lot of pics, Tobes, unless we start throwing them up, aren't we?
That's what I mean, but this one, I've been going through them, and this caught me. This one, I thought that.
Oh no, you've gone right. So you've skipped to the end, mate. That's
that's 2018. So I didn't fish.
This is just the next year.
I didn't fish.
Yeah.
Basically, from that autumn session in 2016, I didn't fish there again until this session. So it is.
No. Yeah, this is
in order, and this is the first time that I ever fished it.
I know the one you're on about, mate. I didn't.
Right. This is the first one.
It just felt like 5 minutes ago this was happening. Though, that's all.
This was the spring of 2018.
Yeah.
Better tell people what it is, mate. First,
so it's a 64-pound mirror. It was
quite very different shape to.
Yeah, it's a pig, that one, isn't it? It's an absolute gut buster. Like, you can see it's heavily filled with spawn there.
Because this is a spring trip, and that means very different fishing.
Yeah, the first time I'd ever seen it in the spring, and to be honest, that was a very, very, very lucky capture. So in 2017, I didn't fish Orient because I went and fished for that Camera in Holland. And in 2018, I remember after getting caught fishing in 2016, Constant said to me, you need to come in the spring. The fish are not all in the reserves. They're more sort of spread around the lake. And it's real. The lake is never more beautiful than it is in spring. And it's visual fishing. So it's not echo sounders. It's like seeing spots, seeing fish, that sort of thing. So I went there. Basically, I got there before the season started. You're allowed to carp fish by day from the 1st of April, and pike fishing and night fishing start on the 1st of May. So I arrived, I think it was like the 29th of April, the 28th of April. Put my boat into the lake. The lake looked 3 times the size in the spring. It looked amazing. The water was crystal clear. I went all the way across the lake to the far side because Constant had caught one stalking with worms, right, in his waders. He'd caught a upper 50 stalking with worms in April. So obviously immediately went to that bay where he'd caught. Got there, tied myself under the trees. I think there's a really nice picture, Toby, of me sort of in bivvy boat under the trees, sort of in a bit of a cave. Tied myself off in the cave here, and the lake was closed. Obviously, for no one's there day fishing. You know, I'm allowed to be there, just not fishing at night. I waited until it got dark and the wind dropped off. I went out in the boat and I was looking for spots that I'd seen on Google Earth. So you zoom in on Google Earth, seen spots, dropped a pin on them, and then seeing my little blue cursor moving towards them, getting to them with a head torch on and the aquascope on to look down, and could see these little white glowing clay spots, just like, well, not little, we're talking big, probably.
In what kind of depth?
3 meters, like 9-10 foot, that sort of depth.
So this couldn't be more different to what you've experienced before. You must be like a kid in a candy shop.
How cool is this though? Yeah. It's pitch black, no one else on the entire lake, and I'm out there with a head torch lamping spots up that I found on Google Earth. Baited them up, come back to the bank, and I waited until the opening. The following morning, when it opened, all the pike anglers were like, they were outside these trees spinning, not knowing I'm sat there. And then that night, so you can see it's a little bit windy there, can't you? You can see it
looks really windy to me, but
yeah. But I've got that sheltering. The wind's coming from left to right, and those trees are sheltering me. When I went out on the left-hand rod, it was quite windy, but that rod, 500 metres out, this is sheltered, and I put a double 26 miller over the side with a 10-ounce lead, a few handfuls of 26 mil boilies and tiger nuts over the top. And it was pretty windy, you know, the boat's constantly moving, the rig goes in, you're already on the drift and you're throwing bait back to it. And that rod, I remember it went down with an almighty crack. You know it's hit the spot like 110%, but you still would have preferred it if you'd have dropped it still and thrown your line on the top. By the time I got that rod back to the boat, went out in the other two which were more in the line of the wind had escalated to a point that when I threw those rods over the side of the boat, I was pretty certain they were fucking nowhere near the bait that had gone in. It was a disaster. You know, you're sitting there for 48 hours to get that chance, and then when it come to do it, the wind and it's the night of a full moon. The wind, big storms coming in, quite a rare wind, south-southeast, which is quite a unique wind. You don't get big south-southeast very often, piling into this bay. And I remember when I got back to the boat, took my life jacket off, sat down, and the boat was on these elasticated ropes. It's just doing this back and forth, and I was like, holy shit, like that's a bit spicy out there, you know. And the clouds are racing overhead, and the full moon would suddenly appear, and it would so it'd be pitch black and then suddenly illuminate when the moon came out, and you could see the waves when it illuminated. And I remember thinking, I actually hope I don't get a take here. It's like, because when you put it out, it's a little bit windy. And by the time it built up to what it was when I went to bed, I remember thinking, yeah, I'm not sure how much I want this anymore. It's more than I like. We will talk about big winds and it's cold and that, but it was genuinely a little bit scary. And when the rod went, I think it was the early hours of the morning sometime. My backing was out. Obviously, that spod braid was out through the rings, and you've got a leader knot that I didn't have loads of confidence in. I picked up the rod, and my plan was just to see how far I could get it back. And obviously, I reeled, probably got it 50, 80 yards back, something like that, before it all ground to a halt, presumably in weed. Put the rod down on the rest, put life jacket on, got into the little dinghy that's like you can't see it. It's on the other side of the boat. Put the little rod in there, this little 9-foot Nash Dwarf. And then you got that moment where you're going to unclip from the mother hub, that's the safety net that's in this. And once I come out from that canopy, out into the pitch black, no one knows I'm out there if something was to go wrong. But I remember I've just went out there full tilt on the engine, probably took 15 minutes to get there. Once I couldn't get to the fish because the wind pushed me downwind. And with any sort of pressure on the rod, rather than helping me, for some reason, it was sort of holding me off. And I ended up having to slacken off, full bore it on a slack line, upwind, come round in an arc. And I went sort of 30 yards behind it and then reeled myself towards it. And when I met it, I was travelling quick, not because of the engine, because I cut the engine. I was reeling towards it with the wind and I was moving fast. And it went from tight to stupidly tight, like something should snap any second, to the rod creaking like it was going to snap, to suddenly it come free. Bear in mind, it's only 3 or 4 meters deep. To the fish coming up, hitting the underside of the boat because I'm moving so fast. I felt it in the boat like that. It's hit the underside of the dinghy, and then I caught a glimpse of it pretty quickly, and it like done one of those sort of 1 minute it's on the surface, all thinks it's beaten. It sees a torch, it sees me, and it fires back down. I was like, seen the double 26 miller hanging out its mouth. It looked like a double 10 miller because of the size of it. It was 64 pounder.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is that?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's why you go, isn't it? That's why you.
But that was lucky because I didn't know that. I didn't see any fish there. Obviously, I was in that bay.
So the Google Earth business was. That's features that you can see.
Yeah.
So you just that's a shallow ground. I'm going there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And as it so happened, they'd bowled a few areas out.
Well, it was like a path. Like from years ago before it was bulldozed, it was a path, like not a road, but a gravel path, like a track that was obviously there, and the weed didn't grow on it because it was so hard.
And who did you? Are they self takes with the thing in the water?
Yeah, self takes.
So all done on your own. Is that important to you? This idea that it's all still you and just you.
I think it adds to the intensity of it. Ultimately, fishing is about experiences and the intensity of those experiences. And not having people sort of interrupt your train of thought and like having to do everything by yourself. You have more time to take it in, you're not constantly worried about what other people are thinking, saying and doing, and being taken from whatever you're thinking. The smiling and the euphoria you feel is quite unique.
Is that the biggest one you'd caught to date to that point?
Yeah, that was 64. It's the other one, 2 pound bigger. Yeah,
it's a significant capture in many ways, and it's the first spring capture. It's the biggest one. You're on your own. You've battled the elements to do it. When did it start to occur to you that these fish now had access to all of this undergrowth, and that was going to become important?
So I fished another 4 nights in that position, and I was fishing off of the trees in that. I was like 30, 40 yards off of the trees, and in hindsight, I can't begin to tell you how lucky that capture is. Like, I've fished a lot there since, but the wind, like Paul's capture, certain circumstances happen and make things happen, and that capture isn't really relevant to a lot of what my spring fishing has been there since. So I blanked another 3 or 4 nights in that swim, moved to a different bay on a different side of the lake. So I've been looking, it was like 30 degrees, and the fish are going to turn up spawning. It's May, they're going to turn up at any moment, they're going to arrive. And it's really, really, really hard to find your way in the trees. It's all weedy, you can't use your engine, you're paddling around, it's a needle, you're talking
it's a bloody great boat, right? Or did you go recce in on the little one?
In the little one, like you're paddling around looking for them, and it's sweaty, mozzy work, you're getting bitten left, right and centre. One day I saw a common of 18 poundish, tiny, skinny, little black male, like on his how do you say that? Reconnaissance mission for spawning grounds. You know, he was like in there, like looking, and he looked real guilty, like he was in there like, looking for it. But because I basically searched the entire area around where he was and didn't see another fish, I made a mistake, which I was only later to find out, and I basically plotted up on the nearest point to this, fishing in 3 to 4 meters again, trying to intercept passing traffic, which I since think is a useless tactic. I told my friend Constant about this 18 pounder. He set up in that bay. He did fish to where I told him I'd seen this fish. It was a day or two later, but he also fished on the opposite side of the bay, which is 800 meters away from where I've seen this fish, and caught a 54-pound mirror. Now, the real, like digesting that myself afterwards, it was like, you saw that fish. There was something to be taken from it. You ignored it. You made a mistake there. You know, a sighting of a carp on Orient is very, very, very important. And since, I've never ignored a sighting since. Never, ever. I always, if I see a fish now, one fish, I always fish that area and give it a few days because I believe there's other carp in the vicinity. Constant went home after they're catching his 50. I went and checked in the trees a day later and stumbled on 15 carp or so. And they came in thick and fast, but it happened. They spawned. Like, you know, it was over before I had a 10-day trip. Ended up fishing a week because they spawned, and that was. Did
you get any photos of them in the water when they were coming in?
No, because they weren't actually. Like, what was shocking for me is how many small ones were there.
Right. So you weren't.
Yeah. Like when I was seeing fish spawn, when you find fish spawning at Orient, you don't find the population spawning. You find a pocket of them. And I remember seeing one deep down a mirror that was probably a 50, could have been a 60. But in the main, there was like the bigger fish, the females were commons of 40-ish. And there was a hell of a lot of males in the 15 to 35 bracket. That's like, where did these come from? I didn't even know they exist. And yeah, it was quite eye-opening that the average size isn't what I thought it was. You know, a normal bite on Orient when you're fishing around the lake is a 35 to 45 pounder. That's a normal carp. A small one under 35, a big one's over 45. So it was quite surprising how many small males that you don't catch them. You know, not very often. I'm not saying they've never been caught, but they're certainly going probably decades between captures.
Grown a couple of ounces in the time.
Yeah.
So do you then flip your trips to spring, or are you still throwing an autumn trip in as well?
So that was 2016. No, that was 2018. So yeah, I fished the autumn of 2018. I fished a different area up near the basically near the entrance to the nature reserve, the furthest end to the barrage. You know, there's always, not always, but there's a good chance of a good amount of fish being in that nature reserve because it's, again, safe water, and the area of water outside it is quite funnily there. Quite funnily, and the chance of intercepting carp is more realistic. So I'd done a 2-week session there. Again, that's not a permitted night area. That's it's not a reserve, but it's not night fishing area. I fished there, caught I think 9 in 2 weeks, up to 47, and of those 9, 3 of them come in a single night. So yeah, even in 2 weeks fishing close to that area, which is, I thought I was going to be on for a bit of a smack up. It wasn't as prolific, and I didn't catch as many as I.
And I'm trying to imagine what it must be like for you. You feel like you're getting to know the lake a little bit, and you go there. You pour a lot of effort into it, and you catch fish to 47, which to you, I'd imagine, isn't what you hope for. Like, it's another trip has gone and you've caught fish to 47.
Obviously, in your mind before you go, you're hoping that you might catch. But I understand the reality of it. That, you know, not blanking is the priority. You know, because you could very, 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 very easily blank there. So yeah, I'm not. I wouldn't say I come home wounded from it. You know, but at the same time, I do come home from it thinking, if I'd have put that effort into fishing somewhere in the UK, so I'm doing 3 nights every week through September and October, put that same level of nights in, is that result comparable? You know, it's you asking yourself if it's the right use of your time. But I enjoy the experience. Don't by any stretch of the imagination, it's very, people listening to this probably thinking I think I'm an expert at lake, because I really genuinely am not. You know, I know that I've got a better understanding than I had before, but at the same time, I always feel like a beginner there. You know, I don't feel like I have its number. And whenever I do feel like I have its number, I'm very quickly put back in my place. You get good results. Like find a feature, you have a big result of it. You think, well, I'm going to recreate that again. And then you come back the same year, do the same thing again, and it doesn't happen. So you really have to appreciate, like, every finding of fish is super important. And obviously they vary in level of importance, but compared to the pods, you know.
During the time that you fished it, so let's say between 15 and 18, were the makeup of the anglers fishing it in the time that you weren't there, let's say, year round? Are you talking about people from Holland, Germany, France, you know, Belgium, nobody, English guys? What's going on? What's the kind of...
Yeah, so the autumn's the general European angler from everywhere, you know, because historically that's
it's as historic to them as it is to us.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like to the Germans, Orient is like the Raspberry of France. You know, it's to them it is that. You have Italians. You have all sort of Czechs. You have everyone wants to come and take their little piece of pie.
Right.
But the spring, it's generally French. You know, like it really is French locals, because long sessions on boats are very difficult, you know, to carry the amount of equipment, bait, power. Like most of the Frenchies that fish it in the summer months, spring months, short sessions, you know, in and out.
So what are the realities of actually accessing that lake when it's at its fullest? Like what in terms
you can't
of
fish from the bank
at all?
Right. So there's designated night zones. You can't fish from them.
Right.
You know, you like in some of the night zones, like the water, the tree lines, the water's.
Oh, it's behind the trees.
Yeah, it's like
right.
You're 60 meters deep into the trees. And obviously, it's going up still. In May, the level is still rising. I think they pull the plug at the end of June or start. I think they pull.
And it slowly drains throughout the summer.
So it's always into the trees. By May, it's always into the forest, but it can rise another metre, which can put you much deeper back into the forest.
And in terms of the way it looks, Tobes, have we got any shots? I imagine it must be magnificent, because what you can't see from Google Earth is the contours of those spits between the bays, for instance, the wooded spits. Are they? Yeah, have you got high ground there?
Reed beds, like you got, like obviously the water, where the water meets the trees. It's the depth will be between 2 and 1.5 meters, something like maybe 3, maybe maximum 3 meters where the water meets the trees. And you've got reed beds in amongst the trees, and it's like the most I've never seen an environment like that. For the needle in the haystack finding of carp in that is immense. What I've learned since is that each bay is almost like its own lake in itself, and in that it can be a bay in general, like a few 100-acre bay, is a couple of meters shallower than another bay that's a few 100 acres. That bay can be dramatically warmer or enough to make the difference. So the shallower bays, they're the ones that you're looking in generally in the
early spring or
in the spring. And it's very difficult to search them thoroughly, you know, because if you imagine, I don't even say how many kilometres of tree line you're talking, and it's not just, you're not just looking in the fringe, you're going in paddling through reed beds. It takes ages. So in my head, I'm not actually fishing until I make a sighting. Although I do put my rods out when I haven't seen fish. I try areas where I've caught before. I try areas that look good. I don't actually. You're looking until you see, and it's at that moment everything changes. It's like it's on, you know.
And these fish are enjoying what, access to fairly rich ground and amongst the trees and reeds?
It's very hard to know what they eat. I don't know. There are in certain parts of the lake around the Michelin area. There's a lot of snails in that part. But I've never actively watched them harvesting, catching snails, feeding on them. I've seen fish eating snails in the past, but I've never really noticed it in Orient, these big snails. I've seen it at Hombeek, those micro ones. There are some crayfish in Orient, but very, very few. I imagine that they're...
yeah, they daren't leave the...
Yeah, but are the carp... I imagine the bigger carp are searching for them, I imagine. The bigger ones, the real big ones. I think they probably tune into them. I've never seen one passing them in the sling or anything like that. But yeah, I feel that they come to the shallow water to spawn, but I think they also... they come in there at night when the water's had a chance to warm up. You think that it'd be a daytime area,
right.
But I actually believe that they come in there at night. A lot of time I think they're in reed beds, sunning themselves possibly, or they might be sitting out in open water 100 metres offshore over a couple of metres of water in the sunbathing below the ripple. Chances of seeing them slim to none, and then of a night descend onto the but you're talking low stock, miles and miles and miles and miles of tree line, and it all looks fantastic, and it never looks the same because obviously these trees are all going rotten because something to do with the water level going up and down makes the trees go rotten. So every year different trees have come down in different spots. Reed beds have grown in different areas. Where the trees have come down, it's opened up light, it becomes weedy in areas that it wasn't. Everything's always different to how you remember it. But yeah, occasionally you stumble on one. And that can be like the tip of an iceberg, you know. One of the best spots for positioning your rod, obviously gravel pits and stuff, I know what to fish for. But what I've learned at Orient is the tree. I'm not talking stumps that have been cut off. I'm talking the tree growing out the lake. The shade that the stump creates leaves clear bottom around the base of the tree. Gives you presentation, which is obviously one thing, but the fish also, when I've seen them, if you see a fish on a tree trunk, you see it like up against it, that's gold. That's absolute gold.
I wonder if, like, because obviously we all know that in the spring especially, a lot of your emerging insects crawl up anything vertical, don't they, to come out and hatch. Like, I imagine they pick them off for fun,
the mozzies are insane. You know, the mozzies are obviously hatching out of the lake. Whether the fish are eating, certainly
your dragonfly nymph and your alderfly and all that sort of gubbins are going to be crawling up everything vertical, aren't they? So, yeah.
There's have you heard of those like European itchy caterpillars that like they basically create like this really weird sort of web, basically.
I've seen that sort of thing.
Like, and if you get it on you, it's like fiberglass. It's got that real itchy that makes you come up in little spots and stuff. And in May it's not too bad, but when I've been back in July and June, it's you couldn't believe that they've infested
covered in trees.
Every tree, like you'd normally be leaning against the trees to look in and like look under the water and stuff. But yeah, they're everywhere, these caterpillars.
Tobes, let's have a look at some pictures from those. Well, certainly that to the 2018 trip. I don't know if we looked at them all, but
I don't think there's any pictures of the forest. I'm not sure if there is any of the water in the trees.
Right. What about following that trip? You went back in the autumn. You had a hit of fish. Let's have a look at some of those if we have got them. Tobes, from the autumn trip, maybe fish to 47.
2018.
Yeah, that 2 trips in 2018. So there's fish to 47. This is the second trip I wasn't talking about. This is back at the fishing from Lucini end towards the barrage. That's a 50. You've seen that one.
Yeah,
that's a 53, and that column was a 54. I had mega 16 fish.
What do you make of their tails?
I don't know what's going on with that one in particular. That's
it's regrowth going on. It's almost gone to nothing at some stage, hasn't it? You can see where it's regrown, but
like just a big old dish. That thing,
incredible.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you why its tail is in that condition as such. Maybe you know more than I do.
No, not at all. No, it's obviously had a fairly traumatic incident at some stage and lost most of its tail. Its
peck and that is all sort of eaten away as well. It's it's got that sort of wilted thing.
It's like the environment, something about the environment that they live in. I don't know, who knows.
Yeah.
So what was the 54? So
common, that one.
So another big deep one.
Yeah, I've seen that one since. Someone's caught that one later.
That looks like it kind of, like you see a lot of young carp with small heads and big shoulders like that now, don't you?
I think that's a younger one. Quite unique. Those scales in the middle on the lateral line, they're quite like heart shaped, quite unique.
Yeah, very. I can't say I've seen any like that before.
No. It was a cool trip there, again, fishing.
On your own?
Trev Cook was about at the same sort of time. He was photoed some of these fish on that trip. He'd gone there for his 40th birthday and done a month. And I think I was there 2 weeks or something in October. But it always gets really busy in October with European anglers coming from all over the place. And when you're fishing far out, and
let's go to that other one. There's a 40. The middle one, Tobes.
This one.
That's from the first session in 2018. The first autumn session up near the nature reserve. That was the biggest one that I caught.
I mean, I love that. That's such a great carp.
Yeah, I like him.
Blunt-headed, big shoulder.
Yeah.
Round. The round tails, and a lot of people's preconceptions about French carp wouldn't allow them to believe that there were fish like that around.
Yeah,
including me. Although I've seen your fish for years now, but certainly before that, I thought a lot of them were pointy tails.
It depends which area of France you're in, what particular lakes. I think there's so much about France that we don't know. I'm
just showing my ignorance there.
If someone within the trade goes somewhere on a bit of info, catches one, and then the whole trade descend on that area. But we're literally scratching the surface.
This is one thing that I've said to a few people is that even the bit where you drive from, let's say you're driving from Calais to Gigantica. Yeah. Within the first hour, you pass through
thousands of 50s.
Well, no, not just little lakes as big as this room to lakes as big as whatever. But thousands of lakes.
Yeah,
they can't all be known about, even by the French.
No, and there's probably stretches of canal and lakes with 50s and 60s that are completely unknown about.
We talked about a bit about it before we rolled, and you've touched on your age. How do you how do you decide where to focus now? Because obviously anything is potentially a big undertaking, isn't it?
What do you mean, as in Orient or
anywhere? Like, let's say we just talked about the potential that France has. That's
untapped. I don't. The reality is that there's not enough hours in a day. People think as someone that does what we do, that there's infinite hours in a day to waste, but there isn't. You've got constant demand to create content for Korda, Carp Fix. I don't do much exploring, really.
Do you think you might miss that though? If your life proceeds as it is now?
Yeah,
could you conceive of missing out on that?
Yeah, I know I'm missing out on. I keep going back to Orient, and I've got a better idea of what's in Orient compared to other places. And by constantly going back to the same place, I'm missing out on newer adventures. In Germany, for example, in the northeast of Germany, there's so many big lakes that are they're all connected. Like we're talking lakes the size of Orient, connected by canals to each other, like in vast. And there's not necessarily monsters in there, but 50s and 60s.
Well, we know from having been, we filmed up in that part of Germany.
Carp. Really cool carp. So I've seen some pictures of fish from the northeast of Germany, like not monsters, like big 50s that just like, oh my God, fish like from Oshlager, but that live in thousands of acres of water.
Obviously, but at that, France is great for a reason. As you progress north, they're going to be smaller, aren't they? They have to be. And you're nearly at Denmark by the time you get to northeast Germany, aren't you?
Yeah.
It sort of goes without saying, but maybe we'll come back to that at the end. I do want to explore perhaps what you might do. But back to Orient. Okay, so 2019. What does that look like? You going back in April again? End of April,
beginning of May.
So you've got to time it.
Yeah, very very beginning of May, just before. I might have even got there a day early again. I think I did actually. Yeah, I got there a day early, and
even though it was empty the year before, and perhaps you didn't need to rush, but
yeah, but I don't know. It's just a buzz.
Have a beer on the boat before.
Yeah, I had my new boat, didn't I? I had that new.
I wanted to throw this up. It looks like something out of the Navy SEALs.
Yeah, it looks cool, doesn't it? There's that shot of it on the Eurostar or whatever.
Yeah.
Does it cost more to take a boat across?
Yeah. I think it's about 500 quid all in all, like with a little van and that.
And had you worked on this yourself?
Yeah, so it was baby blue colour when I first got it. I got it from some boat shop in.
Still is underneath by the look of it.
In Exeter, and then I painted it up over the.
And what is it? What is that?
It was
Is it a Shetland or
something Sportsman, Micro Plus Sportsman it was. 1,700 quid with the trailer. Pretty cheap, really. All in all, was a shell. But yeah,
fiberglass.
Yeah,
construction.
It was really clean inside. It had a fresh paint job inside. Like really, are you recording now?
Yeah.
So it's all clean and nice inside. And bed chair just fitted in there. Painted it with Halford primer. Thinking in my head, I had battleship grey in mind, like dark grey, the colour of the water. But it was like powder grey. Like it looked horrific. Then I tried to spray in some black lines to break it up a bit, and it just looked like some bodged old zebra. And then at the last minute, I bought some army vehicle paint. I think it's bronze green. It was rather than NATO green. Just painted it up, sprayed the windows black from the inside, and I got to the lake
because you literally don't need it, or
because I didn't want light coming out. But when I'm in there in the night,
torch and
stuff.
But you don't need it to get around. You don't need to actually see.
No, because stand up. Yeah, stand up at the back. I got there. I fished the same swim where I caught that 64-pounder. The idea being to start there again. I remember, but I baited up and afterwards sitting there watching Game of Thrones, like one of the main battle scenes, which. You think of a tiny little iPhone with a little speaker like that, you barely hear it. But when you're in the confines of a cabin that's like where there's no other sounds, it was actually like really, really, really intense. I remember having the proper shakes after it. But long story short, didn't catch anything in that area. I caught the 64 the year before, done 4 nights, I think, before I gave up. Decided to go and try a completely different area of the lake with some good weather on the horizon. Constance pointed out 2 or 3 bays where the fish were known to spawn. So I went in that direction, we got to past this headland of a point as you go into the bay, dropped one anchor just to hold the boat in position, and then took off in the little inflatable, started searching in these bays. Didn't see anything, but where I'd parked my boat originally, like the bigger boat, before I'd gone off looking in these little bays, I thought that the bank closest to that boat looked good. It did look good. Like there was lots of reed beds in between overhanging trees, like that. And I remember thinking it looked good there. So I spent 4 or 5 hours paddling in these bays that had been recommended. Didn't see anything. I get within 100 metres of my boat, see with a right-hand reed bed as you see it is, and as it stops on the left-hand side. I got there and I just saw a mirror, maybe 30 pounds, something like that. It saw me, it swam off into the trees.
So the water goes behind those reed beds as we look?
Yeah, so it probably goes in another 30 metres.
Wow, loads then.
Yeah, but it's getting shallower the further in. Like where I saw the fish, and that bit was probably 1.5 metres deep, and then it's sort of getting shallower as you go in because the water wasn't fully up there. This is right at the very, very beginning of May. As you can see, the reeds are still brown and stuff. So I immediately go back to the boat, anchor up properly so that I'm in position in 3 anchors, 1 off the nose, 2 out at 90 degrees off the back end to keep it sort of as still as possible. It's not rock solid, but it's fairly still. And I quickly went over to where I'd seen that fish, dropped a yellow pop-up, put a handful of corn around it, and I was like, because I'd missed out on that opportunity last year when Constant had caught, and I'd sort of ignored that single sight, and I jumped straight on this one. I went out to put the second rod out, which is sort of out of shot here on the left-hand side, and I nearly run over a mid-50 common, a big fat female, big blue thing, like all swollen, its scales all white around the back. And as it saw me, it sort of went into the reeds, I parted them all, just went in there, like shot in there. But there wasn't an immediately obvious spot that sort of stood out. But I put it close to where I'd seen this fish. And then the third rod was further left still. There's an island out here to the left somewhere, and I'd sort of gone inside the island, and there was a hole in the tree line, and inside this hole in the tree line was a big tree that I'd seen a common up a 30 maybe. No, this happened a day later. Sorry, this big tree looked really good. Put a rig there. Anyway, real excited having seen a fish. Got my 3 rods in the water. Looks real nice. got on the beers because I got a bit excited, and woke up in the morning, massive, like real thick fog, pretty hungover, but really surprised that I hadn't caught, like shocked, just that realisation when waking up that I hadn't caught. It's like, bloody hell, that's surprising. And I could hear pike anglers all around, sort of like, you can hear lures like close, you know, they don't know you're there because it's so foggy. And just looking over the side of the boat, I saw a couple of catfish past the anchor ropes, not like monsters, but big old catfish. And it was like they couldn't see me. They were, I don't know if it was to do with the fog. The water was you could definitely see much better into the water because of the fog. It was like polarizing fog for some reason. It took all the reflection away. And I remember after seeing these catfish so clearly that I thought it was a really good time to go and look at my rigs. So I went out to the first rod, that right hand on the thing, all my corn just sat round my pop-up. It just all looked as I'd left it. But between my right rod and my middle rod, where I'd seen the big common, I hadn't actually been down that tree line because I'd put one rod out and thought it was too close. I hadn't actually investigated that bit. So when I'm coming from the right rod to where my middle was, I passed an overhanging tree that as soon as I got to it, I thought, that looks nice. And the overhanging tree's like touching the water like a willow would, sort of thing. I pulled myself under the tree, and it had the perfect like shady bit where the weed hadn't grown, and the stone, rather than just be usually like blackish sort of mud around the base of the tree, there's a few like tiny like fragments of either shell or white stone in the dirt that immediately made me think that looks disturbed like by anything. And as that realization came into mind, bear in mind my face is over the tube of the inflatable, inches off the water with Polaroid glasses on, a snout just appeared from behind this tree, like this big blue snout, and me to you apart, like it's on one side of the trunk and I'm holding on to the branches, like look under it. It saw me, I saw it. It turned round, really fat backside on it, and it shot off like a rocket. Anyway, that morning fizzled out, the fog left, didn't see any more fish. About 300 metres further to the left, I found a group of really small ones spawning, like doubles, in some really shallow water. And on the way back from seeing those ones spawning, I saw a quite big common. I didn't see it close, but I saw it at sort of a rod length or two. It already seen me, and it was like creating this massive wake as it was barrelling off like really fast. And I realised then that there's a good amount of fish here. I think they could be coming to spawn here. I need to get my rods in better place. So middle rod went to where I'd seen this big blue one. Put a yellow pop up right against the base of the tree, and the way I sort of lay the lead out, it'd have to bolt. I sort of set it so it had to bolt away from the forest. You know, it wouldn't be. It would be very unlikely for it to turn back in. So I set the lead against the base of the tree, sprinkled sort of corn in a sort of horseshoe round the tree back to the pop up, and then as I was putting the third rod back out where this tree was in a canopy, like in a hole, I saw another common in there, 38-40 pound, like just snaking past, but it went right over where I'd already baited. So that night when I went to sleep, I'd run out of beer at this point, which makes everything go that much smoother as such. I remember feeling like not only have I found them, but the rods were I'm very happy with the rig placement this time. Like the first night it felt like a bit of a rush, like I got a bit excited. The second night, more sightings, more meticulous with it. It had gone better. And because the beer had run out, I drank a lot of tea or coffee, I can't remember which. I remember laying on my bed, wide-eyed, like very wide-eyed by the situation, by the caffeine. And then coming out, because I couldn't sleep, decided to make myself a drink, made a coffee or a tea, and climbed onto the roof of the cabin, which is you couldn't do that with a bivvy boat because it's too soft. And so I'm now sitting on the roof of the bivvy, and obviously the boat's rocking. As you get up there, it rocks a little bit, and you've got your clutches very, very slack to make sure that you don't dislodge the lead to 10 ounces. But at the same time, you fish with, though you're technically snag fishing, you fish with slack clutches. Because I don't try and stop anything. Whatever happens, I just let it have the line. I play it normally, but I'm not trying to initiate if you go tight with braid like that, something pops. You're better off just letting it go and then going in the boat and going to get it. But yeah, climbed onto the top of the boat, and one of the reels let out a click. You know, so the boat's rocked, and the light come on, and then the light went off, and I sat there drinking my coffee, and then I heard a click, and then the light came on, and it's really dark, and the LED was really bright, almost blinding me, and it was on the rod where I'd seen the big blue one, and within a nanosecond, it's just like, and you're thinking, when you're getting a ripping take fishing to a forest, you even though I've placed the lead strategically thinking it can't run into the forest, in my head it could still be running into the forest. So I picked up the rod, bent into it, line sort of flicked off a bit of weed, and I instantly could see it's coming away from the forest, coming out to the right of that picture. I let it get a deep. You don't want to jump in the inflatable too soon if it's out of the forest, because then you risk getting dragged back in. Once you're on the water, you've got no anchor point. So I played it until it was probably 30, 40 metres off the boat. And at the same time, you're very conscious of your anchor ropes, because they can be terminal if you get the fish caught in them. So I jumped into the inflatable, started playing it. Once you're above it, it's, like I say, you don't really lose fish to hook pulls in Orient. The mouths are very rubbery. And once it was under the boat, I put the torch on, and I could see that it was that fish that I'd seen in the forest, or the one that I'd come face to face with, this big blue one. And at the time when I'd seen it in the water, I thought, upper 40, maybe a 50, but it was 57 pound. Like that's one of my favourite ones out of there. Like, obviously the experience of seeing it and then catching it. I had seen that one before. Constant had caught that one before. So it's like, not. Do
you think the way that he fishes meant that you know, was it pure coincidence?
Do you remember I said I'd gone into a bay because he'd caught one stalking with worms?
Yes.
Now that's the one that he'd caught stalking with worms.
Yeah.
Which was from a bay that was 3 bays up, like a couple of 1,000 metres away, you know. So it's not like
resident.
No, it's not like a resident fish that we've caught from the same area. Whereas the real big one in there, like the biggest one not the biggest one, but the big one that gets caught quite frequently in recent years, has been caught apparently from the same tree in the same bay several times. One guy's caught it 3 times from fishing from the same tree, so that fish obviously likes that tree, that bay. Whereas I think there's a real mix of things go on. Like, some fish are resident to bays, I think, at times, or areas, but then suddenly that can change on different conditions if the water level's higher one year to the next. The thing is that carp fishing is a puzzle, and the puzzle is so big there that I don't think you're ever going to fully understand it. It's
super compact carp. Like, doesn't look awfully long. Look at your hands, look fairly, you know, like knee width apart.
Yeah,
sort of, must be incredibly wide, that fish as well.
Yeah, I think deep was the thing that really stood out. I remember it's quite
covering most of your body, isn't it?
Top heavy. You know, I'm on the boat, they're sitting. You're in a good position for holding big fish like that. You know, it's quite a natural. You've got all the weights taken on your forearms, on your legs. And you can roll them back onto you. But I do remember it being quite top heavy.
So your camera is on your hard boat and you're sat in the dinghy.
Yeah,
right.
You have to, because of the sides on the hard boat, you have to shoot down slightly.
Yeah.
Because it's not ideal. You know, you're making the best.
But you know, you're not an angler that's always, you know, the photo's important, but it's never been what you go for, has it?
No,
it's
the moment. It's the moment. Like, we get caught up these days.
It's a great photo, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that, is there?
In images and trophy shots, and you know, like, it's in your album as such. But you know, I remember Tim Paisley saying, like, when you're young, you know, you just want to catch carp. You get a bit more into it. You want to catch loads of carp. You get a bit more into it. You want to catch a big carp. When you're older, you just want to catch a carp. You know, and I remember as a youngster keeping all my fishing photo albums and showing them to my friends at the quarry, like I was made up when I caught my first ones at Yakeley, and showing them. I don't put them on the gram. I
was going to say, I don't see you as someone who's going to force your photos on somebody and be like, look what I've had.
Well, no, but it was different when I was 17, 16. I was like,
no, but now, I mean,
no. Obviously, I put most of what I catch onto Instagram. Like 99% of what I catch goes onto Instagram. It's just onto the next.
And there's never a second thought when it comes to the Orient in terms of publicising.
It depends what if I was ever lucky enough to catch something that I think could change the dynamic, cause a change of how it is over there, then maybe I'd feel differently about showing it. Because ultimately, like, we're doing this podcast, people are going to listen to it, but 99.9999% of anglers are never going to go there. there are going to be some, but there's not going to be many that go there.
And likely the some that do have already had thoughts about it.
Yeah.
They're not.
Yeah. It's because the biggest fish in the world aren't there. People are not willing to go through on it is difficult. There's easier big fish to be caught. But that's what it.
I mean, you've invested a lot of money. By anyone's.
Ish.
Well, I mean, add up all your boats and your batteries for
yeah,
starters.
But I've always sold them to buy the next one.
Yeah.
So
this boat didn't last that long then. You got a couple of years.
This one died recently. So the first bivvy boat I sold to Trev because I wanted to buy another bivvy boat where the bed could go in sideways, and even still, that's too small. So I sold that to Beadle. Brand new boat, brand new trailer. It's been on his drive. I think he's used it once. It's turned into a duck pond. And I used the money from that to buy the fiberglass one, which is that one that you see there.
Yeah.
But at the end of 22, I left the plug in it. We'll come to that in a minute, but let's just finish this 2019 session because that boat died in quite funny circumstances. After catching that 57-pounder, I caught a couple of small ones. I had a nice 50-pound mirror, and I'm pretty sure while I was dealing, the left-hand rod, the one that was in the hole in the canopy, produced a flurry of fish. And I'm pretty sure what happened is the one that I caught the 57 on had a take when I was playing a fish or replacing that rod. Sander box is under the pillow. So I've had a ripper on the rod when I've not been on the boat and come back, bobbin's just on, just didn't think anything of it because it's sort of slacked on. Anyway, I went out to replace that rod. So I've got the rod in my hand, gone out to replace it, gets to the spot, haven't even twigged that the leader hadn't come on, all my bait's gone and my line's just pointing into the forest like this. I'm just like, oh no. And then I realised the landing net is on the big boat. So I've left a rod in the trees, just like wedged up in the trees and open clutch. Gone back, got the landing net. And then with the waders, had to jump out. Luckily it wasn't too deep. Waded into the forest, just through a reed bed, following my line. And then leader, lead core, yellow pop up on the bottom. And I can see the yellow pop up through the ripples that I've created as I'm wading. And as I've stopped wading, because I've seen the yellow pop up, I'm wondering if it's just attached to a reed being ditched. The outline of a 50-pound carp just sat there in the bottom of a reed bed. Now, that's the first 50. So the next one, I basically shuffled. I could see my lead core lassoed around a single reed stem and its face right against the reed stem, almost touching. And you're thinking one severe yank and the hook comes out. It's panicked. I'm there standing in the water next to it. I put my feet around the reed stem and just lifted the reed out of the bottom. And as I lifted the reed out of the bottom, I had my hand, that's this one, I had my hand on the reed stem, and it all just happened instantly. So from the reed stem come out the bottom and me holding it, it's just started going like this. And the next thing it was against my chest, and there wasn't a moment's hesitation. It just, I didn't have to think about it. It was touching me, so I just grabbed it and put it into the landing net. Like it was upside down in a bear hug like that. It realised it was flapping a lot, and I just manually put it into the landing net, ditched it into the landing net. I'm not sure it would more surprise me or it.
Phenomenal carp as well.
That's a cool one, isn't it? Yeah. Again, I've never seen that one before or since 52. Probably an upper 40 spawned up. That's right at the cusp of spawning. A female. But yes, super cool carp.
Lovely colour and a little bit of a tinge of a white tip coming as well. Again, like those others.
Mega cool. But yeah, so that's the end of that 2019 session. I caught 5, I think, something like that.
Good average size though.
350s.
Right
Yeah. I think what happens if you can find them in the trees before spawning, you can catch big ones. And I think if spawning has already occurred, then you're very likely to be finding males hanging around, just hoping for a second spin of the wheel. But yeah, that boat, I left it at Gigantic from 2019, all through COVID. I went back in 22. I fished Gigantica in May, had a little go. Considering it had been there 3 years, it was in pretty decent nick. Been covered over the whole time. It smelt a bit like mouldy, do you know what I mean, inside? But other than that, it was all right. But at the end of 22, when I caught the big one that we'll come on to in a minute, I I could blame the bailiffs at Gigantica, but it was probably me. I'd caught the big one, came back with loads of beers to celebrate, and I either didn't take the plug out the back, or someone's seen the plug on the back and put it in thinking, oh, it doesn't want to lose that. So when I came back this year in 23, it was level filled with pond water, like, and all the paint had come off the inside, all peeled. It was, just absolutely ruined.
Written off.
Yeah, savage.
Could you sell that one? Could you recoup
I gave it to the bailiffs at Gigantica.
Okay.
They always talk. I hope it doesn't just become, for Danny's sake, I hope it doesn't just become like litter in his Lake Gigantica. Obviously, I keep my boats, or have kept my boats at Gigantica, which makes it, I don't have to pay for the crossing. Logistically, you don't be towing it around, and on the motorway you could always have an accident. So it's very convenient. So I hope it doesn't just become an eyesore.
But you've replaced this with some kind of like Death Star of a boat.
Yeah, so I had quite a touch with that. That's so I fished on the river a lot for a film for Carp Fix on a big plastic boat, a Felicity boat, purpose made thing, 23-footer, real luxury thing. And one day, after my boat got level filled, I remember thinking, I wonder if they do a smaller one, the one that's like a bit more realistic for me. And turns out they did. So I got into a bit of a chat with the guy. He said, I'll do you a good price, but I want to fly over and talk to you in the UK about it. I was like, surely it's better if I come to your warehouse. So I flew over to Amsterdam. They picked me up from the airport, took me for a walk around this boat. Turns out it's a older model. They're welded together, these boats, plastic welded together, and they're going to be printed. So they're going to be like laser printed in the future. So the newer model, and he said, well, like, since it's an old model, you can have it. So like a 20,000 euro boat for nothing. Don't get me wrong, I would not have. I went out to look at it, but I didn't know it was 20,000 euros. If he did tell me there and then that it was 20,000 euros, that would have been a bit spicy, you know.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
And what was it called? Will I be able to find a picture?
You find it on my Instagram. It's a Felicity hard plastic boat.
Why is it good? Like what?
Why is it?
Yeah, what is it? I mean,
it's got a completely flat deck at the back, so like transfer in and out of the inflatable is super nice. The bed is built into the back of it, so it's real space saving. Got those space underneath it, and it's just more. The bivvy boats and the cabin boats are very compact and cramped. This is like really it's like fishing in a luxury swim. Like, it's got flashing lights and all sorts of not that
a landing strip.
Not you're going to catch any more carp on it because it looks like that, but it is a much more
it seems like you've paid your dues in terms of comfort and sacrifice.
And
now
I put a reel up of that plastic boat, and it's done 500,000 views. So my highest ever viewed post was of a hard plastic boat, not of a big carp, with lights on it. And what it shows me is people love tackle as much as they love fishing. You know, like, I know you like reels and stuff like that, don't you? You're into your tackle as such. As I really
old tackle, I should say. Yeah, but don't buy the next.
You like things, don't you? Like nice things. Like, I don't care about any of that. For me, it's all about being there, doing it. You know, I'd fish with 100 quid reels, 100 quid rods.
You kind of have on these trips, haven't you? Let's face it.
That means nothing to me. But it is a very nice boat. It's really comfortable, really comfortable. But obviously, it's a lot of money. 20 grand to some people might be nothing, you know. But to me, that's too much for the amount of time that I would use it. It is too much, you know. It's all, everything's relative to individuals, you know. Like, I don't expect. Thing is, he's given me that boat. If one person goes and buys one off the back of those 500,000 views, he's probably quids in, you know. Maybe it's a couple.
And you fished with one trip. You've had that one, or
two? Once. Yeah, I went in July with it.
Right. So, what did you? When you had the big
one,
fish?
This was the previous year. It was still on my old boat.
Right. So it's before that died.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, let's round up the Orient stuff with what is presumably the crowning glory of your. So I mean, maybe it's not, but the biggest fish certainly.
Yeah. It was the biggest fish I've ever caught in my life, and obviously I am very happy that it's come from there. You know, like that fish that I caught, I'll go to it in a minute, is a relatively friendly one for Orient.
Is that the one you mentioned, having been caught?
Yeah, from that tree.
Yeah.
You know, it's a newish big one, as in like a few years ago it was only just touching 30 kilos, 66 pounds. It suddenly shot up, and since it suddenly shot up, it comes out most years, which is quite frequently, you know, for
10 times more than other big ones.
Yeah. It's a lot for it. But yeah, long story short, I went there in May, caught one. I went there in June and had a particularly good session. The water level was lower in June that year, 22, than it was in previous years. It meant that the amount of forest that they could get into they couldn't get as deep into the forest, and they were hanging around the perimeter of the forest, easier to find, like a set of circumstances. So I went in June for, I think I had 2 4-nighters. I went for 10 days, fished 4 nights, had a night off, 4 nights, went home. Went on holiday with the family, and I caught 6 on each of those 4 nights, so a dozen fish in 8 nights to 55.
Productive then.
Mega productive. Yeah. And the 55 that I caught was really, really nice fish, like a long mirror with like some big apple slices on it. Went home, went on a family holiday with the missus, and in the heat of the day, with a young kid, sometimes they have a little nap in the middle of the afternoon. And I'm not a sun. I hate the sun. I don't like the sun, so I'll go in, sit in while the kid has a snooze. And I remember thinking, I'm supposed to be going to Gillam's Lake with Scott to film in Thailand. It's not really a bit of me, that, you know, and I'm thinking about the water levels lower than normal, or the fish that I'm thinking no one knows these fish are here. Like, you know, I want to go back, but the flights had already been paid for and whatnot to go to Gillam's. So I rung Scott and said, do you think you can get Tom Maker to go instead? He said, well, I can see what happens with the flight, but I can't. I think I had to pay £1,000 toward the flight, like out of my, not out of the business, out of my own money.
Yeah.
You know, so not to go. So it cost me £1,000 not to go to Gillam's, but that then freed me up, and I think I had 4 4-nighters. When you're fishing on the boat in the summer, this was July, it's very hard. You need cold drinks to make it bearable, because there's no escaping. You're on the water, there's no getting away from the heat and stuff. So yeah, you need to break it up. 4-nighters with a cool box, with a frozen big bucket of Tigers. That would keep my cool box cold for 4 days. And I was doing 4 nights, going back to Gigantica, changing it all over, and caught from the off. I think of those 4 4-nighters, I think I caught 6 fish on each of them. Not particularly monsters. There was some 50s in amongst them, some real old nice 50s and that. But obviously over this time the water was going down pretty quick, and I was fishing within a bay, in the bays within the bay, if you know what I mean. So it's like finding fish, fishing through them, having a few bites, they're moving off, finding them again, and like I bait on rotation, and no one there at all. Like I had this 1,000-acre bay, probably not 1,000, 500-acre bay to myself. No one knowing what I'm catching. And one particular day, this is very rare, I'm sitting on a boat, cooking some lunch. There's not a person as far as the eye can see. And I'd seen a carp jump out that morning. I'd seen one, which is in the daytime rare as rocking or shit. And suddenly I hear, "All right, mate, any good?" Bear in mind, I'm an English guy in the middle of a French lake. And I turn round, and there's a dad and lad on a canoe next to my boat. "Oh, we thought it was you. Oh, we're fishing up the other end. We're on Sector 7 or whatever it is. We've only caught catfish and tench," which is just everyone that goes to Orient on their first fish. You fish on clear spots, out in the open water with boilies, you're catching catfish and tench. That's just like par for the course. Have you had anything? No, nothing. Have you seen anything? No, nothing. Like, it's 500-acre bay, but selfishly, I want it all to myself. It's a unique situation. I'm in a night zone, fishing completely legitimately, and there's a lot of carp there, and nobody else knows they're there. No one really comes at that time of year anyway, and I'm milking it for all.
And you're losing the water by the day.
Yeah,
the chance is literally going to finish, isn't it?
Like those findings of carp on there are so important. You know, that's so important. Anyway, while I'm talking to him, one's just launched out 100 yards in front of the boat, like proper shuffled out. And I turned, and I was waiting for that reaction, and he said, did you see that? And I was like, see what? Like that? He said, there's a fish out there. I was like, no, I didn't see it. Well, definitely a carp. He was like, yeah, definitely a carp. I was like, oh, fuck. Because I'm thinking there's going to be two of them, like, invading this area. And then the cormorant came up close by, and I was like, are you sure it wasn't that cormorant? Anyway, that was the last of. I gave him a couple of drinks out of my call box, and that was the last I saw of them. Anyway, long story short, when I've been fishing in this 500-acre bay, I've been fishing, moving around. I'd noticed a massive weed bed, a big one. I was like a big weed bed, noticeably different to anything else in this bay, and it was getting closer and closer to the surface. And then when it hit the surface, you could only just make out the bottom. And it was with the echo sound, it was like 5.5, 6 meters deep. And I've been catching most of my fishing 3.5 to 4 meters deep. Now, one morning I popped the drone up to have a look. And next to this weed bed that I'd been passing, it was just smoke everywhere, just coloured water, just absolutely everywhere. And I remembered where this clear spot was in relation to it. I let the morning period play out. I let the water go clear. And with the drone, you could see the clear spot clearer. When you're in the boat peering over with your glasses, you could just make out it looked paler, but it wasn't, you couldn't see the exact edges of the spot, whereas with the drone, it's just very, 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 very clear. So I fished one rod on this spot next to this massive weed bed, slightly deeper where I've been catching. It was the night before the new moon. First take on that spot, 61-pound mirror, fish called Constance mirror. It's probably the third capture of it that I know of. I'm not saying it's only been caught 3 times, but third capture of it. Big brown thing, very cloudy. To me,
is that the old looking one?
I think it's on its last legs, I would say. Is
that one?
Yeah.
Pop that up.
Very cloudy sort of eye to it. In Constance's pictures when he caught it, I think it was 2018. It looked different to that. This is obviously post spawning as well, so it looked a little bit tired. In all honesty, not sometimes they are absolutely pristine, the fish that you catch, whereas this one definitely old. But yeah,
beast though.
One that I'd hoped.
The fish you caught on this trip, something else, aren't they?
Yeah, there was a couple. There was a 54-pounder before this one, the long one that has a massive cod head on it, like a dinosaur, an absolute dinosaur, big old cod head on it.
That's the other real dark one, is it? 54.
Yeah, that one. That's 54.
It is a cut and shut job, isn't it?
That is an old fish, isn't it? That's
that looks like one of the Andy Chambers sort of ilk.
Yeah.
But what's even going on that shoulder, mate? There's almost like a leather on the fading down into scales, isn't it? It's strange.
Quite unique.
Yeah.
But so caught the 60-pounder, called in the boys from Gigantica. They done the pictures. They brought me a couple of beers. And obviously I'm going home the day after, the following day, I think. Obviously the night coming's the new moon. Put the rods out on the same spots that I'd been fishing in this bay. Gone to bed. Woke up to I'm not fishing with any bobbins. I am fishing with bobbins, but I had a take. What come out of the door, it's light. It's 6 in the morning, something like that. A forward take that stopped. It was like, ding, and just stopped. But something had to have been hooked to give you that sort of forward take. But where I'm basically fishing up to a wall of weed that's like the fish would not be able to run through it. So in hindsight, it was a drop back, but where my line's cut down into the weed, it's given me a forward take because there's tension for the braid to run round. And obviously that tension's built up to a point where it's pinged free, and then suddenly it's not taking, but it doesn't mean it's not on there. So I've reeled up a little bit of slack, made contact to a slightly weeded fish, got it moving, jumped in the boat like it was any other carp. I think on that July session I don't know how many, but I caught a lot. And I don't remember it feeling anything bigger than anything that I'd caught in the run up to that. Nothing that made me think this is going to be big. But it came up on the surface, rolled, and then went under the boat, like facing me, swimming like that. And as it was very close to the surface, not on the surface, but swimming towards me, went under the boat, and I saw it very clearly. And I knew that I'd never seen a carp that wide. I've seen people catch 90-pounders. I've seen Fat Gav catch a 90-pounder out of graviers. I've seen some big ones from Gigantica. But on seeing that go under the boat, I knew that I'd never seen a carp that wide. And obviously that's the main feature of a really big carp. You get deep carp, long carp. But I remember feeling physically sick at that sighting. And then I'd been kneeling on the rubber ring of the rubber tube of the boat as it had gone under the boat. And from that point there, I sat down in the inside of the boat because I didn't want to see it again. I'd literally I'd seen it. I'd seen enough. I was like, I do not need to see that unless it goes in there. It wasn't a crazy battle or anything, but it was one of those nettings when you net it probably a fraction before you probably should. You
bundled him in.
Yeah. I was lifting before he was properly in there. You're lowering the rod to let it fall down as it's all going in there. Obviously tilted it on its side, took a couple of pictures of its flanks, and I knew it was the friendlier big one in there, and that fish has been 85. 85 pounds. Obviously I knew it wasn't going to be probably going to be 80 pounds, but I called in the guys from Gigantica, and they came with I had my waist sling, I had scales, they brought cameras and stuff, and we were just about to get it out, zero in the sling, and I just realised that I had 60-pound scales, which was obviously a bit schoolboy. I got 120s, but I just hadn't packed them. I just you don't really think about your scales really. So they called in another guy from, what's the other lake near Gigantica?
Blue Water or somewhere like that?
Yeah, I think no, not Blue Water, the other one. I can't remember. They called in this lad that took some video of this, brought some scales down, zeroed the sling, and they zeroed it to zero, the scales, rather than zero the sling to them, zeroed the scales to zero, because the fish was in the sling. And it weighed just over 80 pounds in the sling, and then took the sling off after. It was 76 pounds. But an absolute monster. It's really difficult to hold that, as in to try and try to hold it. Like the head-on shot of it is just a joke. I've seen loads of 70s since, people holding 70s head on like that, and none of them look like that. That's because that is an 85 pounder or a fish of that size that's very short. It's not actually very long, that fish, and it is a freakishly wide fish. Like, the widest fish I've ever seen. It's
as wide as your body, isn't it? Like the cross section there.
Seeing it on the mat sitting there, it was just it wasn't right. It just wasn't right. But yeah, the guys come and helped. Really appreciate it. You don't get in your lifetime, you're not going to have many moments like that. Like I said, for me, the pinnacle of what I've done in carp fishing is a 30-kilo fish from the Champagne, those big Champagne lakes. It was something that I always wanted. It wasn't really a target. It was something that I always aspired to. It wasn't like I'm setting my stall out, I've got to do this. But yeah, it was.
I like the wrinkles, mate.
That's because it's so spawned out.
Okay, yeah,
and
that had been pumped up.
Yeah, and do you think it looks a bit like Colin? Do you think it's got a bit of that going on?
Yeah, not the head, but the body, definitely.
Yeah. It's not. Let's be real. It's not like a scaly megalodon, but from.
What do you want? I mean, you want a bit of everything, don't you?
That's your typical monster, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not your pointy-finned commercial monster, but it is your typical monster. What you'd expect a carp to look like from a lake.
Did you feel like that was the crowning sort of achievement of your time on Orient?
It's you're judging it on feeling, on how you feel, and the night of the 62 and the 57 felt more euphoric because of the pain and the suffering that I'd gone through. And I was absolutely ecstatic. Whereas this was, when you're catching lots of fish, it does take the edge off of things, doesn't it? Like the amount you catch has a bearing on how you feel in the moment. And yeah, I'm not going to say it wasn't big, because it was a big moment. Mm-hmm. Like it was, but like there's obviously like that session I'm talking about previously. That was, yeah, there was. I just couldn't believe that. Whereas I knew that fish existed. And I was buzzing. I was absolutely buzzing. Like pulling the anchors up afterwards and like driving back to Gigantica with the boat on the trailer, stopping off at Aldi to get a load of beers, and then going back and obviously reliving it with the bailiffs, with the anglers fishing Gigantica that week. It was. I bumped it on the way home as well, so I had like a good social with the guys at Gigantica, like the customers as well. And then stopped at the services on the way home and bumped into a load of people on their way out to France and stuff. Like telling them about it, it's like, can't hide your excitement. It's not like just talking about it.
It's rare, that you don't always tell people about, you wouldn't assume that they're interested, would you, I guess?
No.
Something like that, you can't hide it.
Yeah, it's just like, I was like, you want to tell everyone, like you want to phone everyone. Like, I remember it was in the sling next to the side of the boat. I phoned Constant and I was saying, like, I've caught this fish. He said, you can't catch that fish where you are. It lives under the tree in this bay, like 500 metres away. I was like, mate, it's got fins, it swims. I've caught it. It's here. Like,
did he come down?
No, he didn't. Couldn't. No, he couldn't. I think he was taking his little one somewhere or something. But definitely big.
The other fish that you caught on this trip that we haven't looked at, we have to put up because they're so good. Yeah, it might be the next trip. I don't know. Did you do another trip after this? Was the last one you did?
I haven't given you any more shots of the 20.
There's the leathery one. Like just have a look at some of those types, because for me they're as good a carp as you'll see. Like you had the fish you had this trip, maybe further up the top. Like that one. Yeah.
So this one, this is actually quite a good story. I had the drone in the sky when I had the take with that.
Right.
So I woke up in the morning. I've not caught anything. And I'm fishing. I hadn't seen any fish on that the night before that going into this. So I had my rods. I was anchored up centrally in the bay, fishing long, like 350s on each rod, like trying to cover as much water rather than sort of focusing on one part of the bay where I thought they were. And I took the drone over to where my water bottle was on the surface, and I could see it like near the clear spot that I'd placed my rig on. And then as I was looking at the clear spot when my rig was on, I was thinking, there's a much better one to the right, like 15 yards away that I didn't know. I was like, oh, you've put it on the wrong fucking spot, you idiot, right? And as those thoughts were going through my mind, suddenly this massive sub, the spot that I was fishing on was the size of this table, and suddenly a 4-foot fish comes onto the clear spot. And I was like, Scott had said to me, make sure you've got a SIM card in the drone. And I had one in there. Didn't press it, did I? And suddenly, this fish that's appeared on the spot, I've gone, cool, that's a big one. And it's gone on its side and flanked. And I went, cool, look at that flanking on the mud. I was like, oh no. Like, so I pressed home on the drone. The drone's coming back. I'm playing it until I got it stuck in some weed. Landed the drone on the roof of the boat in blind panic, and then gone out there and dug it out the weed. 57 pounder.
Sensational carp. Like an old Savay fish or something, isn't it? Like from the old school, the 80s.
Yeah,
it was bigger.
When it came out of the weed, when I found it in the weed, I could see to the bottom where it was. It was all like lassoed up in some kelp. It came out the kelp, and once it was free of it, it went off on a run like 30, 50 yards, and the wake coming off the back of it, just like massive wake like coming off the back of it, like beast. That fish came out twice more that same year, so I'd never seen it before, and then it came out twice more in the autumn, which is unheard of on there, but I think a lot of the carp are spending huge amounts of times within the reserves, and when on certain years when a pod of them are not in the reserves, it is likely that like fish will get more.
It's like their turn that year.
Yeah. If they've come without out of the boundaries of those areas, they're much more likely.
I think that was the main one I wanted to see, Toad, but there's probably more, aren't there? They all seem to be of phenomenal quality that trip.
Yeah, obviously I'm not photoing the smaller ones. They're like there's a lot of sort of generic. Like go back one, sorry, Toad. That one from June was, it's not a great shot of it. But that was super cool.
That cluster of scales at the top there.
£55.
Do you know, I like the atmosphere in the shop though. It almost looks like milky sort of early morning.
Yeah, I'm at the slipway.
Right.
So where you put the boat in and out, I've brought the fish back to the slipway, and my inflatable was just parked on the concrete there. But yeah, that's the beauty of it. You know there's big fish in there, but you can't ever fully comprehend it entirely, which leaves that element of mystery. But it's not like you're fishing for ghosts. There's always definitely something. There's always going to be something in there that's going to make you really happy or really happy, or experience like a great experience as such. But yeah, it's always nice that you don't know it all.
No, I mean, and that sort of naturally leads us to whether you can see beyond this for your own private obsession, fishing obsession. These trips that you've got available to you. Can you see beyond the Orient?
Yeah, I don't know when that is or what that is. I think I know it when I go there. That's for me. I live quite a sheltered life. I'm a little bit introverted. I'm not someone's networking. Someone who's like sending those DMs. I'm in the perfect position to be doing that. To be sending those DMs and flirting with people. But I'm not that guy. I find it a bit sleazy. But when we went to Oslager, stumbled on something really nice, didn't we? Something really good. Went to Honbeek. I felt like we stumbled on something really good there. And in Orient 2015, I stumbled on something really good there. And who knows in the future what you're going to stumble across. Like those lakes in northeast of Germany, they interest me. But yeah, I still think there's carp in Orient that would rock me. I do think that there are some special fish in. No, there are. But yeah, I don't know what's next until I see it. Yeah, I really don't.
I mean, I guess if either you or somebody else catches something earth-shattering from the Orient, that might almost bring the curtain down on it for you.
Yeah, I think it's already massively changed. This new guard that is on there is making it. If you are not like before, you've got reserves, night zones, and just general area. Before the general area was all fair game. Like no one cared fishing general area outside of a night zone, but now general area is as frowned upon. Well, not this is as finable as reserves. So now they are really, really being limited to the night zones. I don't want to fish in the reserves. I think it's sort of a bit hook and duck. It's sort of. Would you feel any sort of gravitas from catching one of those mega, like caught an unknown fish? You probably would take the shine off it a touch, maybe. For some, but yeah, I don't know. I think Orient's going to be more and more difficult with the how it is, and yeah, who knows? Sooner or later, it might get banned. If you skate close to the edge, sooner or later Yeah.
Is there a case to be made that there could be this kind of thing in any number of French public waters, or is that, as a naive Englishman, is that just something that I might imagine and actually couldn't be further from the truth?
Well, I don't know about I think the calibre, I think the big fish, there's definitely probably some pointy-tailed monsters in some lakes. But like a fish of that age and that ilk, yeah, I don't know how much of that is out there. I think that's what makes it special. I think it is quite a unique thing. I think there might be. Who knows? France is a huge place with loads and loads of waters. I don't think they're big fans of us fishing their lakes, and I think we get fed we all get magnetised to the same venue. Someone within the industry will go somewhere, catch something, and next thing you know, everyone's taking it in terms to make a film there, whether it be the Belgian canals or like they're super trendy at the moment, aren't they? But that's one person has to find out about it first, and I think there's for those willing to I don't even think I'm willing to waste weeks of my life, but if you are willing to put down the time and just go for the full-on adventure, then I think there's definitely 60s, like 100% 60s in lakes that you've never heard of out there. Hundreds of them. Hundreds of 60s in hundreds of lakes that you've never heard of. And as you go up to 70s and 80s, obviously that's getting smaller, you know, the chances. But there are 60 pounders in hundreds, if not thousands of lakes that we've never heard of. And there's hundreds of them out there.
I think that sounds like a really good place to leave it, mate. Thank you very much for sharing your Orient adventure with us.
No problem. Thank you.
The Thinking Tackle Podcast.